All right, let's get it. Drive time. Tuesday afternoon, 12 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. Hot day outside. It is. Well, it's June. It's late June. It's summer. So what can you do? And it feels like it outside. We are looking at about 88 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass, producing the show today. We are unexpectedly very, very busy with some local stories, national stories as well. It is a historic day, potentially, for BYU football. We'll tell you why, as the announcement came down earlier today on the Pat McAfee show. Pat McAfee likes himself some BYU. BYU likes themselves some Pat McAfee. Several different parallels and conclusions to draw between that relationship. But Ryder Lyons, one of the best quarterbacks in his class coming up for 2026, has chosen BYU to play his college football at. He chose BYU over Oregon. Those were his final two schools, but he also was offered, well, pretty much offered by everybody when you're looking at a kid that is this highly thought of. BYU has not had a five-star recruit since 2003. Their best recruiting class, according to the information I was reading earlier, was 2010 when they were a top 30 class. And it's not just Ryder. They've got a really good tight end from St. George. They've got a good offensive tackle as well. My guess is they're going to finish probably in the top 20, top 25. We'll have to see what this does. So we do have some local storylines to get to with the college football recruiting stuff on the program today. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope you're having a great work week. And we'll get to all of the fallout and takeaway from Ryder Lyons, this young man from California, who will serve an LDS mission and then will be available potentially for 2027. So we'll get into this, and we are efforting some BYU guests to shed a little light on this. And, ultimately, 6 years ago, old producer of the program, our old buddy Brady Clark, who unfortunately was a COVID casualty. He's not dead. We just had to let him go. I want to be very clear.
Just to make that clear.
Brady's alive and well. He's married with a child, and he's moved on to do other things, but he sent out a tweet and tagged me in it. That sounded like I said he died, like COVID casualty. But no, he's not dead. He's alive. That 6 years ago when we first started talking about NIL and the ability for these young people to make money while they play football or other sports at institutions could be a massive windfall for Brigham Young. And as we fast forward 6 years later, here we are. Now, one of the things that bothers me about our business these days is you've got a bunch of talking heads that throw darts at dartboards and only focus on the one thing they get right, and they ignore the 40 things that they got completely wrong. So I'm not bragging, but ultimately it's become pretty clear that they're in a spot down there to capitalize on the current landscape of collegiate athletics to add to their football and basketball programs and certainly other programs as well. So it is a big day for BYU football, and it is a shot across the bow to the University of Utah. Another one, quite frankly. Utah continues to piece together their 2026 recruiting class. So we'll get into some of these storylines on the program today. We have another trade to talk about in the NBA. We have a couple of trades to talk about in the NBA, actually, as C.J. McCollum is headed to Washington. I'm sure he's super excited about that. Then we'll get into the Drew Holiday to the Portland Trail Blazers, mainly as we're doing Sports Talk Radio in Salt Lake City. The Utah Jazz are not involved in any of these transactions. For all the conversation about, Brian Windhorst going on SportsCenter and saying that he's told the Jazz are going to try to expedite this process. So far as we sit here on the eve of draft day, and we'll get to some draft today as well, the Jazz have stayed pat. NBA draft tomorrow. Excited for this. I'll be anchoring our coverage. Gordy Chiesa, Richard Smith, two men that have been in hundreds of war rooms, decision rooms on draft night, will help us kind of understand the landscape of what we'll be dealing with tomorrow. Sham Sharani is reporting the San Antonio Spurs have settled on Dylan Harper after some potential options to move off the pick or maybe take some other players. Feels like the intrigue starts at 4. That's my best guess because most of the reports are VJ Edgecombe is going to head to Philly at 3. So we'll get into it on the program today. Get you ready for the draft. We're also a couple of days away from the NHL draft. I hopped on a Zoom call this morning for the Utah Mammoth. Bill Armstrong addressed the group, talked about their plans for 4. The NHL draft will come down coming up on Friday of this week. So a lot to do. Aaron Rodgers, whatever. He's announced that this is probably it. Fine. Good riddance. So a little NFL offseason, a lot to do on the program today. Good guest list. We'll start things off NBA Daily Assist style with Zach Harper. We'll get Zach's take on Durant to the Rockets, on CJ to Washington, on Drew Holiday to Portland. The NBA draft tomorrow, of course, Oklahoma City. Their championship parade today featured Alex Caruso shirtless with a couple of Michelob Ultras. Chet Holmgren tried to address the group, but clearly was wasted. Shirts optional for the Oklahoma City Thunder today in their parade, so we'll get with Zach. We'll do mostly Jazz with Tim McMahon today. Jazz offseason NBA draft. Timmy will stop by as well, as he does every Tuesday. Efforting potentially Blaine Fowler, maybe some other BYU guests for our 3:30 slot that's open right now to talk about this day that could be historic for Brigham Young. And then Bill Riley, Voice of the Utes. Good day to have Bill on. We'll talk about, kind of what this signals for what the University of Utah needs to kind of step up and do to keep up with their brethren 40 miles south as the crow flies from our studio. Dave Fox live in studio, 4:30. I'll be on TV with Dave tonight, 10:35 KMYU. We're going to preview the NFL draft, the NBA draft, and I imagine we'll pop around and talk about a bunch of different things because it's an unexpected, busy Tuesday afternoon. Zach Harper, Tim McMahon, Bill Riley, Dave Fox, maybe some other guests. We're a little fluid on this Tuesday. All of you, the great listeners, thank you for making us a part of your day. Me, Spence Checketts, and that guy, Porter Larson, not a COVID casualty, but wearing sunglasses indoors. Hello, Porter.
How are you?
Do I need to drop the Larry David line on you again?
Yes.
There are two types of people that wear sunglasses indoors. Blind people and a-holes.
And people sensitive to light.
Well, that would fall under the first category.
I'm not blind, though.
But sensitive to sight.
I probably should use the eye doctor version of our insurance over here.
Do we have that?
I think so.
You might want to check, dude.
I do. I do think we do. I do. But I'd notice it. I know I'm only 30, but I've noticed I'm getting older with the eyes. It's not like I'm blind or not. I can't see anything, but sometimes, just reading the strain on you, it's getting there. It's getting to that time.
Well,
so
you do what you got to do. I'm not judging.
They're not prescription yet.
Just every time I see somebody wearing sunglasses indoors, it just reminds me of the Larry David line.
It's fair. It's fair.
All right, a lot to do. Our first guest, the Knicks are interviewing Mike Nori.
Who?
That's hilarious.
Who's Mike Nori?
He's the assistant coach from Minnesota that took over when Chris Finch tore his ACL. That's wild. All right, our first guest today will be Zach Harper. But before we get to Zach, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Big news for the BYU Cougars today. BYU has secured its highest-ranked quarterback since 2002. Ryder Lyons on the Pat McAfee Show announced that he is headed to Provo. He chose BYU over Oregon and some other schools, but the final two were BYU and Oregon. Ryder 6'3", 205, Folsom, California. He is ESPN's number 5 pocket passer in the 2026 class and entered today as the nation's top-ranked uncommitted quarterback. So he will be part of the 2026 class later this year, but he will serve a mission after graduation and will not formally join BYU until the spring of 2027. That seems to indicate he's going to serve one of these 14-month missions. I don't really know exactly how that works. When I was growing up, it was a 2 years period. Maybe that's changed for athletes. I honestly have no clue. But I'm not going to be one of these guys that tells you I've been grinding tape on Ryder, but I've learned a lot about him since the rumor started to surface that he could potentially land at BYU. So a bunch of visits this spring included stops at Michigan, Ohio State, Ole Miss, and then his finalists were BYU, Oregon, and USC. And then his brother actually plays at USC. He elected to not take his visit to USC, went up to Eugene, spent some time at Oregon, then came down to Provo and visited BYU. And then today announcing that he will play his college football for Kalani Sitake and Brigham Young starting in 2027. So BYU has a recruiting class that's shaping up to potentially be a top 20 class. From what I looked up earlier today, and of course there are different services that do this, whether it's ESPN or 247, this On3, this new On3 website, social media platform also is doing this. BYU's best class, from what I saw, was 2010. And it was the 30th ranked class in the country. This is shaping up to far surpass that, maybe even be top 20 or higher. Ben Olsen was the highest-ranked quarterback back in 2002. That did not work out well. And, of course, we should pause to say for people that are anointing this kid or, Ute fans that are worried, highly ranked recruits, even recruits as highly ranked as this, typically, are a dime a dozen. It really comes down to how they develop, how they settle in. I mean, Ryder's got a mission in front of him. There's a lot that has to happen between now and then for him to be ready. Of course, there's always the narrative about, when you take a mission for a year or two, 14 months or 24, you enter the kind of prime of your life in college in a way that 18, 19-year-old kids don't. And that's a debate that has been highly debated for a number of different years. But what is very, very clear is the pedigree that this kid has is really, really, really special. He was the 2024 California Gatorade Football Player of the Year. And he can do a little bit of everything. He's a dual-threat kid. He completed about 68% of his passes, over 3,500 yards, 38 passing touchdowns, 8 picks. First year as a starter in 2023. His sophomore stats were actually better than his junior stats. The next year, over 3,000 yards, 46 touchdowns through the air. He also can run the football. He's combined for over 1,500 rushing yards, 37 rushing scores across 2 seasons as a starter. So, look, in a vacuum, this appears to be a big-time get for Kalani, friend of the show. Maybe we'll try to get Kalani and A-Rod on to talk about this. Brock Harris, who's an in-state tight end from St. George, number 32 recruit in the country. They've got a defensive tackle who was an Oregon flip, and a couple of other kids in this class at this point that, again, indicate BYU could lock in the top 20 football class for their 2026 recruits. Now, that's the vacuum net from today, okay? The macro 30,000-foot view net is what we've been talking about on this show, as I referenced as we kind of came into the show today. I don't want to ever be the radio host or sports media personality that takes victory laps for things that I got correct because I get a lot of things wrong. And everyone in our business seems to just throw darts against the dartboard, and then they focus on the one that lands on the bullseye, and they just simply ignore the rest that don't even hit the board. But this has become very, very clear for quite some time now, and it wasn't hard to see what BYU would be able to do once they were allowed to unlock their sizable resources. The LDS Church and the culture of the LDS Church, its members, they understand the power of the purse, and they understand the power of tremendous resources when it comes to being able to capitalize on opportunities that are put in front of them. That's a dynamic of the religion, even though some people in the religion want to ignore it because certain members of this culture don't like to acknowledge very uncomfortable truths. And when something like this happens, I just laugh when I hear these BYU goobs that call themselves media members to try to get in front of no, this is not about NIL. This is not about money. This is about the BYU experience. This is about Shut up. Take your victory lap, okay? Just acknowledge what it is and don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing, okay? It can be about a number of different things, and certain, folk that are involved in that culture don't necessarily have the ability to hold a couple of thoughts in their head at the same time. This is about a football program under Kalani Sitake that has really grown over the past few years with Jay Hill as the defensive coordinator, our guy A-Rod as the offensive coordinator. They go 11-2 in Big 12 play last year, and they have an excellent season. And they have a great bowl win over Colorado in the Alamo Bowl. It was a really good year for Kalani, and that helps. Okay? It's also about the deep-pocketed donors that provide the big NIL checks that motivate these players to come play here because that's part of the reality now. And there's nothing wrong with saying that out loud. When you cry about it and you deny and you deflect, you look like the moron, okay? I'll say what I've said. Take your victory lap, man. This is a big deal. This is like the A.J. DeBonsa equivalent for the football program, something like it. And when reputable college basketball media members, namely Jeff Goodman, come out with the knowledge that you're paying A.J. DeBonsa $7 million for 5 months of basketball, or the reports, including Scott Drew himself, giving an interview that, Baylor basketball thought they had locked in their future point guard, at least for this year, for a couple $1 million, and he reneges on the deal to take over $3.5 million from BYU to play for them. Stop denying it. Stop lying about it. It's actually worse than denying. You are liars. You are lying, okay? I have not seen an NIL number for Ryder, but guess what? It will come out, and it's fine because that's the name of the game. The game has changed, and it's been changed now for a couple of years. And the fact of the matter is the changing of the rules and the changing of the ecosystem is only positive for a place like BYU with tremendous resources and a tremendous amount of powerful donors and boosters and alumni that care about BYU athletics that are clearly willing to open up their pockets. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why whenever announcements like this come down from BYU, when we hear a big-time recruit has signed to play for them, the propaganda machine, the quote-unquote media members that actually work for the school, I don't know if they get phone calls from the higher-ups to be like, hey, we have to start lying about the money stuff. We have to deflect and pretend like we're actually not competing with NIL. I don't know if they receive messaging that they're supposed to further from their platform, but it's so beyond pathetic and lame. And again, it's worse than denying you are lying to people because this ecosystem and landscape is benefiting you. Lean into it. Lean into it and actually be authentic and don't be liars, okay? So when the NIL figure comes out, it simply will be on par. I'm not saying more or less because I know people getting their feel-goods about this. It will simply be on par with what an Oregon could have paid or a USC could have paid. Because I can promise you, if Oregon or USC doubled BYU's NIL number, Ryder Lions would be in Eugene or Southern California, not in Provo. Let's be adults and grown-ups about this, okay? So last thing here, University of Utah had an innate advantage over Brigham Young University when it came to athletics for a decade. And it's very simple, and we can be very reductive and say Utah had a P5 invite, and they had P5 access as members of the Pac-12, and BYU was independent. And throughout the course of that dynamic, Utah football specifically elevated themselves past Brigham Young. There's the head-to-head. There's the overall record. It was essentially a generation of Utah football dominance, okay? And it was because of a few different things, but the main advantage is Utah football had a Pac-12 invite. BYU football was wandering in the wilderness. We'll speak your language a little bit. As an independent with no ability to play for a conference championship, no innate scheduling abilities. So we saw like UMass in town and all these horrible programs where once BYU lost one game, their season was essentially over, right? When BYU, two-tiered thing here before we catch a break. When BYU received Big 12 access, you combine that with the changing landscape of collegiate athletics that allows powerful boosters to get involved with the power of the pocket and the power of the purse. Those two things have catapulted both BYU football and BYU basketball to a level that if you're a Utah fan, you should be worried. You should be concerned. If you measure your program simply against BYU, right now the shoe's on the other foot. And this is another shot across the bow. Ryder Lions committing to BYU today is another shot across the bow up here in Salt Lake to the University of Utah to get their act together and get your things in order. So if you're a Ute fan and you have the great fortune of owning a business that's done well, or if you have deep pockets or a few commas in your bank account, if you haven't contacted Mark Harlan and the athletic department to see how you can get involved with the Crimson Collective or whatever they're calling it these days, it's probably time to act if you want to keep up, because this is a situation where 40 miles south of here, they're building juggernauts on the football field and the basketball court. And we'll see if Utah football and Utah basketball and Utah athletics and the institution overall can keep up. All right, more on this a little bit later. We'll catch a break, but we'll do a little NBA coming up on the other side. The NBA draft is tomorrow. We have an NBA champion, and we have three pretty notable trades, four if you include Desmond Bane. And we'll see what the Jazz are going to do prior to draft night tomorrow. They're going to wait and maybe make some moves during the draft. So we got a lot to do. Zach Harper's our guest coming up on the other side. Great to have you with us on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. I'm starting to change my opinion on this.
There we go.
So, I've told you in the past, I have this weird thing, and Zach will appreciate this because he hosts a podcast called Cinephobe. My friends have always been fascinated when I latch on to, like, clearly horrible movies because it's really interesting to me to watch something that's so bad and wonder how it was actually made.
Yeah, of course.
I'm starting to feel that way about Pitbull and the bit we do with Zach. It's so bad. Like, there's nothing good about it, but it's so bad I'm starting to kind of be fascinated with it, if that makes sense.
I'm fascinated how it is worldwide renowned.
How it's real, period.
And, yeah, real.
Okay. Zach Harper, Tuesday afternoon. Hey, buddy, how we doing?
That horn starts coming in and you don't get excited? Are you kidding me?
No, I just
I
explained that I'm starting to because it's like Pitbull to me is the dirty deeds of musicians. I'm starting to become fascinated with it.
Wow. I mean, he is Mr. Worldwide. You point anywhere on a map, he's been there.
How is Cinephobe these days? It's been a minute since I've tapped in. How we doing?
It's great. I can't remember. Let me see what we've got coming up this week. We just had a good run of some real bad movies. We did like Stigmata, like we did some real weird stuff. I believe we got a Van Damme movie coming up this week.
Love
Nowhere
it.
to Run. Yeah.
It's such a brilliant idea for a podcast because truly, for years and years and years, I would have roommates and the friends are like, why are you watching this? I'm like, because it's fascinating. It's amazing to me, like, how stuff like this actually gets made. So as a fan of really awful movies, like horribly good movies, it's really such a great idea you guys came up with.
Thank you. And I think what I love about it is because I'm with you, because forever I would just watch horrible movies and just giggle to myself. So I'm like, you think about it, you're like, that's the best take they got for this.
Mm-hmm.
So then I start wondering what else happened in the shooting of this movie. And then for us, we do a little research and we get to joke about it. And then forever, Amin El-Hassan and I were just texting each other about bad movies we were watching. And then it probably took us way too long to figure out we should be doing a podcast about this. And thankfully people seem to like it.
All right, a lot to do, Zach. Since you and I last spoke, I won't bury the lead because we have an NBA champ, a very deserving NBA champ. Oklahoma City was historic all year long with a great regular season. Took them 7 games to get by the Pacers, but they did. So my two-part question is, what does this championship say about where they are now and also where they could be for a number of years?
Yeah, I mean, where they are now is, I think you heard Sam Presti say it, is like ahead of schedule.
Yep.
Right? He didn't expect them to be this good, this quick. And I think it's a testament to just the entire organization of how they run things, how they develop, how they go about it. It's almost too robotic. Like, it almost seemed like they weren't enjoying winning the championship at times, but people process things differently. It may not have hit them yet, but yeah, there was part of me that thought, did they think that there's still more games to happen? Because it seemed a little odd. It felt like I kept waiting for it. Like if you're at a restaurant and you have a salad and they're like, would you like some black pepper on there? Would you like? And you're like, yeah, just keep going. I was like, keep going with the celebration. Like, let's get some emotion here. Keep going with the emotion. I need you to just keep grinding that emotion back onto this salad of winning. But I didn't seem like that was happening enough. And so, but it seems like they're in a good spot now. I mean, at least for the next 2 years, I think they're in a good position just financially. I mean, this is the thing that stinks about the collective bargaining agreement with the second apron, and I hate that you have to bring this up now with everything that looks into the future of a team. But they've got big extensions coming to Chet Holmgren and J-Dub this off season, which won't kick in until the season after next season. So that's when it gets real expensive. They have a supermax deal going. It's going to be like 4 years, $300 million to Shea. That will be this off season that kicks in, the same time. So they really have like a year, maybe 2 years until they have to start making some tough decisions on guys like Hartenstein and Lou Dort and Alex Caruso and Aaron Wiggins and all these other dudes. Or maybe they have to make a decision on a Chet Holmgren or someone like that. But the good news for them is they have all those draft picks, right? The reason they have all those draft picks is to be able to attach it to contracts or, bring in, cheap labor in terms of, cost control with rookie deals and develop those guys to kind of bring in some help, that you normally wouldn't be able to do when you're that maxed out and that good. So they do have a plan. I don't know how long this lasts because it never lasts as long as we think it's going to. And in today's collective bargaining agreement, I don't know I don't know what that's going to look like.
Championship parade, Oklahoma City, Caruso shirtless, smashing ultras. Chet could barely form a sentence. What would Zach Harper's NBA championship parade 48-hour window look like?
Remember J.R. Smith in 2016? It would be exactly that.
Okay.
It wouldn't be pretty.
Fair enough. And I wouldn't blame you at all. I mean, celebrate, do your thing. All right, let's move over here before we get to some other thoughts on the West. The net of the Pacers' entire situation, Zach, is what? Because you just have to. I am not a Pacer fan. I never will be. But holy smokes, nothing but respect for Rick Carlisle. That run, going to 7 games against that team when nobody even thought you were even going to get out of the first or second round is a remarkable accomplishment. But layered in the question has to be the Achilles injury to Tyrese Halliburton and what it means for this group moving forward. So the net of the entire Pacers situation, Zach, sounds like what?
I mean, it's good. It's positive. It just stinks because I don't know, next year's out, right? Like, he shouldn't play next year. I don't even know if he'll be able to play next year because he injured it so deep into the postseason, obviously with Game 7 of the NBA Finals, that you should consider him out for next year. Do you consider him fully back for the year after that? Doesn't this usually take about 2 years for guys to really be back to form? So are you not punting on, but are you kind of like taking the next 2 seasons out in terms of being able to really maximize what this team could be? And at that point, what does the makeup look like? You have the same players. Are you cycling guys in and out? I think it makes the construction of this really difficult. Rick Carlisle said the things you're supposed to say about, priority number 1 is getting Miles Turner back. And I think that's the right move. I think it's a good idea because you don't have a good replacement for him. But I don't know that he's the guy that you need long term. He didn't play great in the finals. He had moments, but he wasn't knocking down shots for a guy who's a shooter. He wasn't grabbing rebounds at all. He had times where he was defending the rim really well, but he also had times where, he was allowing layups left and right. So, they do have some roster construction things, but overall, I think the important thing was their identity and their team culture. And I know team culture is always such an overused thing, but it really worked with them, right? Like they built this, they decided 2 years ago, hey, we've got this guy. We're going to build everything around him. We're going to play this certain way and make life miserable for everybody else. And it worked. It really, really worked. And I think it'll work again. You just got to get that guy back to full health.
So as a result of the Durant trade, and I certainly am interested in your thoughts on that, that combined with, of course, the litany of injuries the teams will have to deal with, but we'll focus on the Western Conference for a moment. Oklahoma City, an overwhelming favorite in Vegas, not just to win the West, but win the championship next year. But according to Vegas, the two teams actually, that's not even the right way to put it. According to Vegas, it's Oklahoma City and then a large gap. But the two teams that are the closest are Houston and Minnesota. Do you concur with that? And would you put any other teams in the West that actually do exist in Oklahoma City's cul-de-sac?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think, Houston was already really, really good and really intriguing. You add Kevin Durant to the mix. I assume it's going to be a good fit because I do think you can just kind of plug and play him anywhere. You've got to make sure he's happy, right? You got to make sure that he doesn't get soured on the situation. But I think he fits with what they want to do and what they need. Defensively, they're going to have an identity whether he's on the floor or not. So if he misses some games, I don't think it's a big deal. They still need more scoring in the backcourt. I think they need a little bit more reliability with scoring and shooting in the backcourt. And I don't know if that happens by a trade. I don't know if that happens by a development. I don't know if that happens by signing a role player who can step in. But they're not complete here. They need that. But they're also going to have, Amen Thompson is becoming a monster on the court. I think that postseason, as brief as it was very important for him. So I think they're in a great position. Minnesota, it's going to be interesting to just how do they pivot from what they were. They built that team to beat Denver, and they beat Denver, and then OKC emerged as the new monster. And clearly that makeup doesn't exactly work. I also think that series was closer than the 5 games that it was. I think Game 1 was a lot more competitive than people think it was, and I think Game 4 was right there for the taking. And if they win Game 4 and it's 2-2, we've seen you can put pressure on OKC. Denver did it, Indiana did it, and what does that look like for Minnesota? They need more help in the backcourt or at least on the perimeter for initiating offense for Anthony Edwards. I don't know how much flexibility they're going to have to make that happen, but I do think those are the 2 best teams outside of OKC in the West.
Now, the East gets very interesting. The Knicks interviewed Micah Nori today or this week. So, we'll see what happens there. Respect to Coach Nori, longtime assistant, number of different stops in the NBA, filled in for, you know what? I'm not breaking it down anymore. Anyway, we'll see who they land on. But when it comes to this, I don't know, I've heard gap year. Tom Haberstraw's used gap year for Boston. They trade Drew Holiday to Portland. Of course, the injury to Dame, so Milwaukee's compromised. And then obviously Halliburton's injury. I mean, those teams will stay competitive, but I suppose, Zach, and we'll lean into the odds again out east, it is Cleveland, New York, and then Orlando, who acquires Desmond Bane. With these players hurt and compromised, what do you think happens in the Eastern Conference next year?
Yeah, I mean, I would put the Knicks as the favorite, or at least my favorite. We got to see what does happen with the coaching situation, because I don't think just any coach is going to be a good hire. I do like Micah Nori. We could break that down if you want, but I do like him quite a bit. So I think that would be a good option. But you also just never know if guys are going to embrace the new coach. So they were right there, and I think that they're not that far off. I think they need a couple of bench pieces. I don't think the issue was Tom Thibodeau not playing the bench. I don't think he had much of a bench to play, right? So I think it's kind of compounded on those two issues on top of each other. So I don't really believe in Cleveland after these last three postseasons. I think that they've got to prove that they've got the mental makeup. I know they've got the talent, but I think they've got to prove they have the mental makeup before I start buying them as a team that will break through, even though they had 64 wins and looked great in the regular season. Orlando, obviously, as you mentioned, is super interesting. I want to see what Detroit does. I think Detroit's got a great opportunity to make a splash this offseason, whether that's grabbing more help for Cade on the perimeter, whether it's grabbing another dynamic big man inside to either replace Duren or help Duren, or if that's a four who can stretch things out, if they can grab some more offense in there. I think Detroit could be another one of those teams that really surprises everybody. If Orlando is healthy, and maybe if they grab one more shooter or one more point guard who can really distribute, I think they'll be a massive problem in the Eastern Conference, and maybe they're that team that pulls in Indiana this year.
All right, let's see here. Before we move over to the draft stuff, let me just ask you a general question about if you're hearing anything concerning the Jazz getting involved in any of these transactions. We have Drew Holiday to the Blazers, of course, Durant to the Rockets. C.J. McCollum, I'm sure he woke up to a text he was pumped about. He's a wizard. And Jordan Poole will take his talents down to New Orleans. Austin Ainge, introductory press conference, made some pretty bold statements. The Jazz have not been involved in any of these transactions yet. We'll finish with some draft, but before we get there, are you hearing anything regarding the team that plays just a few miles from where we're broadcasting, the Utah Jazz?
Nothing specific in terms of the Jazz, but I have heard that these deals are not complete, right? That other teams will likely get involved in teams with some flexibility and some cap flexibility and cap space. So that is a team like the Jazz. I would assume that they're trying to get involved, whether that means grabbing a draft pick, a second round pick, a player, whatever that entails. But I do think that these deals, as reported, are not going to be exactly what they appear to be in the headlines. I think it's going to get a little bit more complicated because of this collective bargaining agreement and just the machinations that these deals have to go through. So nothing specific on the Jazz, but from the way it sounds behind the scenes, it would not shock me if they're involved in any or all of these trades.
All right, let's move over to the draft. Zach does a mock draft for The Athletic, does a lot on these prospects. So I'm going to start with a general question about the Jazz at 5, and we'll go from there. Here's how I'll phrase it. Best case realistic scenario for the Jazz to walk away with a prospect at 5. Who would you say that is as of now?
Oh, I mean, I'm probably highest on Trey Johnson for like the realistic scenarios there. I love Trey Johnson. I think he's a dynamic scoring guard. I think he's a great, just classic 2-guard, great footwork, has a great shot, good size. I think he will be someone, maybe we got to see something defensively from him. I don't know if that was a Texas thing. I don't know if that's a him thing. But I think he would just he would add so much great scoring to them a year or two from now, and he's fun. He's a really fun guy. The next guy after that would probably be Jeremiah Fears, Like, I know we've done the Keontae George thing, we've done the Isaiah Collier thing. I think he's legit. I think Fears is a guy that everyone seems to be raving about him. He's super young for even a draft prospect as a freshman, and he is a just absolute monster in the pick and roll. Like, I think he is a guy that I wouldn't look at his shooting percentages. I would look at the film with him. I think he's going to really shine at the NBA level.
What do you make of the Ace Bailey stuff? I mean, I keep reminding people he's an 18-year-old kid. He's not making these decisions. Certainly his reps, his agent, and the stuff I've read about his agent, I'll say he's just learning on the job, okay? But typically, if you're going to cancel every workout you're offered, you have a promise. But when I heard he canceled Philly at 3, I'm like, well, dude, he didn't get a promise at 1 or 2. So, like, ultimately, what do you make of this noise? What's the motivation for Ace's camp to roll this way, and what do you think it means for his status tomorrow night?
Yeah, the thing you hear is that he doesn't want to maybe be in Philly, but even that's murky, in that he doesn't want to, do the whole like one-on-none workout because that doesn't really show anything, which I get, but also like you're not going to go play 5-on-5 out there either because why would you if you're potentially the number 3 pick? Like in how workouts go in today's world, that's not how that really goes, and then like maybe it's just trying to get away from teams that are not so East Coast, except Philly's East Coast, right, and Washington's East Coast, and so I don't know. I genuinely don't know what he's doing other than, and not he, like you said, it's his agent, like disrupting the draft process. I'm for it in terms of adding a little chaos because I do think the draft process can be a little dumb, but if you don't have that. If you don't have that promise and you are willing to go through the potential embarrassment of falling on draft night, it's fine. You could use that to your motivation. You can use that down the road, but it is a risk, right? Like, it is a risk. Like, I don't think Charlotte's going to take him. I don't think Utah is going to take him. I think Washington is super interested. I think Brooklyn would love to have him, and maybe that's the goal is for him to fall down to one of those teams. But I don't fully understand what's going on with him in his camp.
Feels like most of the noise around Philly is they've landed on Edgecombe at 3. Let me ask you this, though. If there's like maybe Philly is zigging and maybe they just take Ace like everybody thought they were going to for like a year. If Edgecombe and Trey Johnson are there at 5, who do you think the Jazz should take and why?
Ooh, Edgecombe. I don't think Edgecombe would get past Charlotte at 4.
Agreed.
But I do think Edgecombe is the guy to take there. I mean, everything I've heard from people around him and around the program, they're like he almost was too good of a teammate last year and didn't take over at times. And it's not that he couldn't. He was just trying to make sure everyone was involved, everyone had to go with it, and he's got way more to his game than what he even showed, and on both ends of the floor. And I think that is. He's only 6'4", and you like a little bit more height, but his arms are long. He's crazy athletic. He's got a good shot. He's got good passing ability. He's got good defensive instincts. I think he's someone that we're going to see him like 2 months into his rookie year and wonder, why didn't we see any of this at Baylor?
Yeah, no, that's fair. He played here against BYU down in Provo, had a really, really good game. So Richard Smith, who's a consistent guest on the show and was with the Jazz for 40 years, he'll be on our draft night coverage tomorrow, seems to be pretty enamored with the Malawach kid out of Duke. Now, the Jazz have a big in Walker Kessler that they like an awful lot, but there are a lot of rumors that maybe they're going to try to reset the clock based off the fact that they're miles away from anybody. Not even close to being even kind of decent. Do you think there's any sense to maybe taking the Malawach kid at 5 and kicking the tires on Kessler, then resetting the clock to kind of go back to the beginning after a 4-year, very clunky, somewhat embarrassing attempt at a rebuild?
I think it makes a lot of sense, but I'm also super high on Malawach. Like, I think he is one of the best prospects in the draft, and he is someone I would risk a higher pick on. I've seen some people say, maybe second half of the lottery, maybe more towards the 6 to 10 range. And I get it. I get that he hasn't played that long, and there are some things you maybe worry about in terms of skill development here and there. I think his touch and his instincts for a guy who's only played basketball for a couple of years are just incredible. His size, you obviously can't teach that. And it's not that Walker Kessler isn't good. He's really good. He's going to be a very good, starting center for a long time in the NBA. But and I don't know if this is a proper comp, but it might be the difference between having an perennial all-star center in Maluach if he can develop into that versus like having Jakob Poeltl as your center for 10 years, which not a problem to have Jakob Poeltl as your center for 10 years. He's really good. You can win a lot of games with him. But I do think the potential, if you're looking to hit home runs and find that guy in the rebuilding process, I would almost rather risk it with Maluach. But I'm also, again, super high on him.
Let me ask you about one more prospect before I say you loose, because it seems like everywhere I look and everybody I read, Con Knipple has been really rising up draft boards. I think Gavoni's latest has him off the board at 4 to Charlotte. A lot of people have surmised if he's there at 5, the Jazz would look at him. I'm undecided on this. The measurables aren't great, but he really guards, and, of course, he can shoot it. What sort of NBA player do you think Con Knipple would make?
Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing, like, the Luke Kennard comparison because of like White Duke shooting guard, right? And it makes sense. But he's a really good passer. He can shoot with a guy in his face, right? And I think that's the important thing is it's not just he'll knock down open shots. Like he was a great shooter this last year when guys were right up on him, and so that's an important skill to have as well. To me, my issue with him is whenever I saw him play, he looked like someone who was like 6'1", 6'2" with the way he played. And not like in a good, like, oh, he's so shifty kind of way, in like why isn't this guy playing like he's 6'6", 6'7"? I think for me that's my worry with him is that he is going to be physically overmatched at the NBA level, and I don't want to see, I wouldn't take him in the top 5. That to me, like, I think he's going to be a good pro. I just think there's a lot more potential with guys like Sears, guys like Trey Johnson, guys like Maluach. Like, though, I would rather risk it with them rather than go with Knipple that high in the draft.
All right, buddy. Appreciate the time. Should be a fun week. Draft week's always fun, so you have a good one. We'll chat soon. Thanks, Zach.
Are you coming to Summer League?
In Vegas?
Yes.
We're debating and discussing, but you need to come to the Salt Lake Summer League because that's where the real party is. You know that.
Okay, I'll go there, but you got to come to at least the first weekend in Vegas.
All right. If you come here, I'll go to Vegas.
All right, deal.
Deal. There he is. Zach Harper from The Athletic. I always appreciate his time. He joins us on a very consistent basis. He writes power rankings weekly for The Athletic. He does mock drafts as well. We were talking about his podcast info, but it's a very fun listen. If you've never checked it out, I would encourage you to do so. At Talk Hoops is where you find him. All right, we will catch a quick break, our final break of the 2 o'clock hour. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Tim McMahon will join us coming up next. We'll get back to the local college football storylines, namely Ryder Lyons, one of the top 5 quarterback recruits from the 2026 class, has chosen BYU over Oregon. We've got some guests that are a little bit fluid. Bill Riley, voice of the Utes, Dave Fox later on. A lot to do on a busy Tuesday show. It's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, joining us coming up in a bit. Dave Fox rolls by. Started things off with Zach Harper, but it is a Tuesday, even in June. That means it's time for our weekly hit with the great Tim McMahon. Timmy, I know you're jam-packed, so let's get right to it. Since you and I last spoke, we have a deserving NBA champ. How do you add color and context to not just the finals run, but the entire season that we just saw from Oklahoma City?
Yeah, I mean, listen, for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I mean, we just witnessed one of the great individual all-around seasons in NBA history. I mean, you punch up his numbers, scoring champ, regular season MVP, finals MVP, complete brilliance for a guy just entering his prime. And then, like, the question with Oklahoma City, now that they've gotten one, is how many? They've got a chance, you got to put a couple together before you start throwing dynasty around too much, but they've got that kind of potential. When you look at, they've got one guy in their regular rotation who you could say is deep into his prime. The rest of them are either just starting it or not even approaching it. This is going to be a force to be reckoned with for a long, long time to come. Certainly the team that everybody in the NBA is going to be chasing for the next few years.
So who out this way, out west, exists now with them? The Vegas odds basically says, well, it says Oklahoma City is the massive favorite. But if there are two teams that can actually maybe make them uncomfortable, according to Vegas, it's Houston with Durant and Minnesota. Do you think those are the two teams that Oklahoma City needs to worry about, or they're just going to kind of do their thing?
Well, I don't think Oklahoma City is going to necessarily worry about anybody. I would say Denver is the team in the Western Conference that pushed them to the brink, that pushed them to 7 games. Denver's the one that has a player that you can make a real serious argument that is even a more dominant force than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So I think you've got to include the Nuggets in that conversation also. Denver's the last team other than OKC in the West to win a championship. The Rockets, I think, are going to be – we can play with the semantics of contender, but, man, the Rockets were a number 2 seed that, in my opinion, were a go-to guy away from being a real threat, and they just went out and traded for Kevin Durant without giving up anything that I would consider to be an essential part of their long-term future.
So the Pacers net of this, Tim, sounds like what? An incredible run to the Game 7 of the NBA Finals, a horrible, horrible ending with Halliburton coming out, knocking down 3 threes and then doing the Achilles. So as somebody who witnessed this run, what's the takeaway from Indiana's side?
I mean, maybe the most impressive playoff run, not to end with a championship ever, certainly in recent memory. When you talk about all the upsets they pulled off, all the miraculous comebacks, the unbelievable clutch run that Tyrese Halliburton ended. And look, man, like I don't believe in basketball gods after that, because for him to have that kind of clutch run, to be gutting it out in a Game 7, to get off to that kind of a start in a Game 7, and then to get hurt in that fashion, like, man, what a tragic ending. What a terrible way for that run to end. And unfortunately, like, he probably doesn't play next year. It's probably now a gap year for the Pacers. And what a tough playoffs for Eastern Conference stars. Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, all out most, if not all, of next year, recovering from Achilles. And the East is wide open. And I know, like, there's guys or stars in the Western Conference that maybe aren't feeling like they're in a long-term fit right now, that are looking east and saying, maybe we should be trying to get there, because it's a hell of a lot easier out east than it is west right now.
Vegas likes Cleveland and New York, and then Orlando is trailing a little bit behind. Would you agree with that assertion based off the litany of injuries you just referenced?
Yeah, and I really like the Desmond Bane trade for Orlando. He's never been an all-star. I would say the odds of him being an all-star now are a heck of a lot better. Now that he's in the Eastern Conference, that's another reason maybe you find some stars that are looking that way and wondering if that's a place that they want to be. But I think that they really needed, obviously, shooting and another guy who can create some offensively. I think he's going to be a really, really good fit. And that was also a sign from Memphis that, hey, they're not close to contending in the Western Conference. They step back type of trade to kind of reload, certainly get some draft ammo, and see what they can try to do around John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.
Let me go back to the Durant deal, Tim, since I haven't been able to talk to you. Do you think Phoenix got enough? Do you like it from both sides? Do you think there's one winner in this situation?
No, there's one winner. Phoenix wasn't going to get enough, though, because of the circumstances.
Sure.
Kevin Durant had a year left on his contract, and he was going to have control, and he was not going to, he was like, they could have gotten more from Minnesota if KD would have been willing to go there. He wasn't. He didn't want to go there. So the Timberwolves weren't going to trade for a guy who didn't want to be there. And, the Suns took the deal that they had to take if they're going to get a deal done before the draft. But the Rockets weren't going to boost that offer. They weren't going to give up a Tari Eason, or certainly don't even ask about him in Thompson. They weren't willing to give up Jabari Smith Jr., Reed Shepard. They were only willing to do a pick, not multiple picks, and certainly not multiple of the Suns' own picks. And the Spurs weren't even that aggressive, and neither were the Heat. So they took the offer they had to take. But, man, they're a long way from paying off the trade that they made to get KD. And, by the way, the team that has the most assets left over from that is the freaking Houston Rockets.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's funny. Tillman Fertitta learned some tough lessons early on. The Chris Paul trade was a disaster, right? But he learned his lessons, and they went through a painful rebuild, and they've been very, very patient since then. It's a polar opposite approach to what Matt Ishbia has done, and the Rockets are benefiting from their approach, and they're also benefiting from the Suns' approach.
We've seen, I guess with the Bain transaction, we've now seen 4 pretty sizable deals, couple today. C.J. McCollum is a Wizard. Interesting situation there. Jordan Poole will take his talents, and some other pieces involved too. Reference Bain, reference Durant, also Drew Holiday is a Blazer. The Jazz not involved, Tim. I know we only have a few minutes left, so let's hone in on the local stuff. Are you hearing anything since you and I last spoke about what this offseason could look like for the Utah Jazz?
Well, listen, the Jazz aren't going to tank, according to Austin Ainge, but that doesn't mean they're going to make win-now trades. How foolish would it be for them to be making big, splashy, let's win right now? You're not going to win now. They're going to have another tough year next year. They understand that. So I firmly believe if the Jazz are going to be making trades around the draft or, into the early stages of the offseason, they will be operating as sellers. Will it be John Collins, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson? I don't think it'll be Walker Kessler. That would surprise me. But again, I don't think they're in a position where anything but patience makes sense for them.
All right, final thing. Tomorrow night, NBA drafts. According to what you're hearing, you think we'll see a lot of movement? Do you think it's going to be a fun, dramatic night, or do you think it's going to kind of be status quo?
No, I think there's going to be a lot of movement, and it's already started, right? You mentioned the Drew Holiday deal, sending him to Portland, which that's an interesting one. You mentioned the McCollum Poole trade today. Obviously, the KD deal is already done, but no, the draft is a trade deadline of sorts because if you're going to trade for draft picks, you want to be able to make your own pick. And so I anticipate that it's going to be a very busy evening tomorrow and even into the second round.
All right, buddy. Appreciate the time. We'll set you loose and we'll chat soon, okay?
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, Tim McMahon covers the NBA. For ESPN, covers the Utah Jazz more intensely when the Jazz are interesting. NBA draft coming up tomorrow. We will have coverage for you right after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock on the program. The Jazz are at 5. They're also at 21. And, the interesting thing about the Jazz is all of these mocks are different. Now, I like Vicini from The Athletic, Gavoni from ESPN. There are a couple of other writers that do a really good job. Gavoni's latest is Jeremiah Fears to the Jazz at 5. Now, we had Zach Harper on earlier. He very much likes Jeremiah Fears. This is probably not a fair thing to do, but whenever something works at a high level, the way this stuff goes down, teams will try to copy what Sam Presti has done, and teams will try to replicate what the Boston Celtics have built. Obviously, it didn't work this year, but they won an NBA championship. They went to 5 conference finals and 2 championship series and won 1. And I can't help but look at the size and the length and the athleticism of the teams that are top shelf in pro basketball right now. Jeremiah Fears is 6'2". Keontae's like 6'3", Isaiah's 6'2". Like, I just don't know if building a roster full of guards that are small is a formula for winning basketball in the modern day and age of the NBA. When you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, the team that just won the NBA championship, and again, I want to acknowledge how unfair this is because Oklahoma City is historic, and we probably should have been more adamant about understanding that early on. And even Indiana fits the bill like this a little bit. Boston fully healthy certainly does. And then there are unicorns like a Steph Curry who's 6'3", but he's just Steph. It's just different because he's so elite at what he does. But you look at Alex Caruso, 6'5", Lou Dort, 6'5", Shea is 6'6". Obviously, Hartenstein and Shed are 7-footers. You keep going down the list. Cason Wallace is 6'3", plays like he's 6'6". Aaron Wiggins is 6'5", Jalen Williams is 6'6", Kendrick Williams is 6'8". Like, you just simply have to have big, lengthy wings that can guard multiple positions and also not be liabilities offensively. You know, the era of like a one-sided player like a Bruce Bowen for the Spurs back in the day that was mostly a defensive stalwart who could knock down some corner threes, like that's done. And so if you're marching out against a team whose average height in their starting lineup is like 6'5", 6'6", and you have two players that are under 6'3", and your first guard off the bench is 6'2", unless all three of those players are ultra special, I just think you're up against it. So we'll see what the Jazz do tomorrow night. There are a bunch of different mocks that indicate different directions are possible. Con Knipple is a name that has risen up draft boards. Gavoni has him at 4 to the Charlotte Hornets. It feels like the intrigue does start at 4. The first 3 picks, according to most people, feel like they're kind of dialed in. Of course, Dallas will land on Cooper Flagg. Shams Charania reported today that San Antonio has just decided that they're going with Dylan Harper, and actually he mentioned the Oklahoma City model because San Antonio, of course, has the reigning Rookie of the Year in Stephon Castle. And then, of course, Victor Wembanyama is the cornerstone of everything they do. They also traded for De'Aaron Fox. I don't think Chris Paul is going to be on the roster. So, the redundancy term in the NBA might be something that we need to do away with because is there redundancy between Shea and J-Dub? Like, is there redundancy between those two players? Or are they just two players that are built similarly and are both awesome? And you just want as many players as possible. One of the silliest things I can remember when people were discussing the Boston Celtics prior to them actually winning a championship is can Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum play together? Is there too much redundancy between those two? Because they're built similarly. They both have similar skill sets. You just want as many big, long, rangy athletic players that you can possibly get that, of course, has complete skill sets that can develop in your system. So San Antonio just adds Dylan Harper to a roster that is already young and exciting and talented and will be good for a long, long time. So it feels like that's kind of the deal. And then all the intel as a result of the weird situation with Ace Bailey, who just won't work out for anybody, whether or not he has a promise, I think that's something we're just going to have to wait to find out tomorrow night, is that Philly has landed on VJ Edgecombe at 3. So it feels like tomorrow night, and again, reminder, we will have draft night coverage for you, both round 1 and round 2. The Jazz have 2 second-round picks. Now, if the Jazz trade both second-round picks tomorrow night, maybe we'll recalibrate about our night 2 coverage. But tomorrow night, myself, Gordy Chaser, Richard Smith, I'll be anchoring our coverage. And then for round 2, Gordy's going to take the night off. It'll just be me and Smitty. So we'll kind of see how this goes down. So a reminder, after we say goodnight tomorrow at 6, stay tuned for our live coverage of the NBA draft. But after 3 is where it gets interesting. Now, Charlotte, as Zach Harper said earlier, doesn't feel like they've gone all in on the same sort of rebuild that Utah and Washington have. Basically, those two teams who were very front-facing and obvious about their motivations a year ago to lose games on purpose for the name of draft capital. It's a painful process, man. It is a painful process because whether you are Utah, whether you are Washington, whether you're the Pelicans who kind of shut it down, the Brooklyn Nets, like all of those teams were very obvious about their motivation to be unserious about competing, only to watch the Dallas Mavericks, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Philadelphia 76ers get the top 3 picks. Dallas, of course, already has Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving. They wrapped up Daniel Gafford with a contract extension. They've got really talented pieces. It's not a bad roster, even though they moved off of Doncic, as we've talked about. But they already have legitimately one of the top 5 players in the league when he's right and when he's healthy. That's who I think AD is. Now, you could talk about he's up in age, his health issues, all that's fair. Point is, with the way this stuff is hopefully supposed to play out for the teams that are struggling like the Utah Jazz, it's just hard to stomach Dallas with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving grabbing number one, San Antonio with the two straight, winners of the Rookie of the Year award, Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle. They just grab Harper at 2. And then ultimately Philly still has Joel Embiid and Paul George on their roster. Now, tremendous amount of questions about Joel Embiid's health, tremendous amount of questions about Paul George's interest in playing basketball anymore. But those two, when healthy and right, are still very elite in the top, upper half of superstar players in pro basketball. There are plenty of smart basketball people that believe Joel Embiid is as unique as anyone we've ever seen in the NBA. The problem is he just breaks down. But they still have him on the roster. I didn't even mention Tyrese Maxey. You just add VJ Edgecombe to that group. So then the intrigue starts. And Charlotte at 4, according to Gavoni, Con Knipple would be the play there. So if Con Knipple is the play at 4, the Jazz will have their pick of Jeremiah Fears, Ace Bailey, and Trey Johnson. And if you want to throw the Malawatch kid from Duke in there, Smitty likes him an awful lot. That's certainly a name you can look at. But that's not a horrible group of prospects to have your pick of if you're the Jazz. Gavoni has them taking Jeremiah Fears. I've already outlined my concern with that. If those players are available, I think I'll probably just side with what Zach Harper just said earlier today and Tony Jones echoed. Trey Johnson feels like he needs to be the pick. Because if the Jazz go Jeremiah Fears at 5, again, I'll lean back on the term redundancy. No, it's not a super excellent parallel. There's probably a little bit of a false equivalency if I say a Jeremiah Fears is the same as Keontae or Isaiah. But again, it's another smallish guard that you'll have on your roster under contract for at least 3 or 4 years, depending on how the rookie contract plays out. The Jazz need length, and they need athletes. The Jazz have been historically pathetic defensively for 2 straight years. Is that another smallish guard who doesn't feel like he has the length and the athleticism to exist in the NBA? Just feels like the wrong move. And I cannot corroborate or speak to what is going on with Ace Bailey. And no, he didn't measure at 6'10" like we thought he would. He ended up about 6'8" without shoes. I hate the without shoes thing. It's the dumbest thing we do. You wear shoes when you play basketball. Measure in shoes. I don't care how tall you are barefoot. We're not playing pickup ball in Africa. Like, we wear shoes. It's the dumbest thing. So I wouldn't mind if the Jazz landed on Ace Bailey at 5 based off the intel all year long that had him as one of the top 3 prospects because, no, he's not 6'10", but at least he's 6'8", with long arms, a 7'2" wingspan, 7'1" wingspan. And he was the number 3 prospect pretty much all year long before this chaos kind of fell on him as a result of him not working out for teams. Trey Johnson, about 6'5", okay, 190, 6'10" wingspan, standing reach 8'5". And to me, he at least has the upside of being a great offensive player, can really shoot it, can initiate. Yes, all these players are young. We don't know what they're going to be. And that's why whether it's college football recruits or NBA draft picks, you have to proceed with a tremendous amount of caution before you anoint or dismiss. It's simply going to take some time. Gavoni's latest mock, there's not a ton of local interest in the draft this year. The one name is Yegor Demon. At one point, I saw him as high as 10 or 11. His latest mock has Yegor going 13 to Atlanta to play for Quinn Snyder, which would still be a lottery pick, but late lottery pick at that. I do wonder, and I've heard some people talk about this, and certainly some people write about this, the whole, Ryan Smith is a massive donor to BYU basketball. He's one of the alums that cares about BYU basketball and BYU athletic department, so he clearly is part of, not the entirety, but part of bankrolling BYU basketball to give them the funds they need to bring in talent to play for Kevin Young. He is donating a lot of money. I don't know how much. I don't have access to that information. But one of the things that people have talked about is there anything about that that can benefit Ryan's pro team? And while my initial reaction is no, the only angle I could come up with is the challenge that the Jazz have. Well, the Jazz have a lot of challenges right now. They're one of the 2 or 3 worst rosters in the NBA. It's going to be another really, really rough year next year. But when you kind of pan back from the vacuum mindset and talk about it from more of a macro 30,000-foot view, if you go all the way back to after John and Carl either retired or left, the challenge that this team has had is in this city isn't drafting well. It isn't developing well. It's retaining the players you've drafted and developed, because in the NBA, it's a 3-tier system. You have to draft well, you have to develop, and then you have to retain. The retention piece is the one piece of this puzzle this team has not been able to figure out. So is there anything there where, for instance, like Yegor Demon spoke glowingly about his time in Provo? I think he met, I don't know if they're engaged, but he's dating a girl he met at BYU. Will that change when he sees other big cities and experiences other places? I don't know. But is there anything that we could draw from a great experience from a player that Ryan helps hire, that's the way to put it, to play for BYU, that Ryan helps buy to pay for BYU, and they have a good experience at BYU and in our state, and then therefore would be more likely to stay here if the Jazz draft them, develop them, and then able to retain, which is the one piece of the puzzle this organization can't figure out. It still would be a reach to take Yegor Demon at 5, but here's a question to ponder if you're Jazz fans. If you have a guarantee that Yegor Demon will play his entire career in Salt Lake City and Trey Johnson will leave in 6 or 7 years, who would you rather have? 6 or 7 years of Trey Johnson or 12 or 14 years of Yegor Demon? Now, again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying the Jazz should draft Yegor Demon at 5, but BYU bought and essentially paid for 5 months of basketball for A.J. DeBonsa to the tune of $7 million. Ryan was one of the people that wrote a check to help make that happen. And I am telling you, if you have not watched this kid play, he is everything he's cracked up to be and more. I don't think he would have been the number 1 pick this year over Cooper Flagg, but he will be talked about during the draft process next year the way Cooper Flagg is being talked about now. So if A.J., who appears to really be enjoying his time on the ground in Provo, if there's an opportunity to grab a kid like that who has experienced our state and actually likes it, maybe there's something there. Maybe I'm reaching because, of course, it's not as easy as the Jazz have to get the number 1 pick to draft A.J. DeBonsa, but maybe there's something there where Ryan's I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I've heard a lot of people talk about that and write about it. That's not my thing. It's Ryan's money. He can do whatever he wants with it. He graduated from BYU. He very much loves BYU. He also owns the Jazz. But in the spirit of trying to figure out if there's actually any synergies here, maybe that's the angle that we could reach for and actually make something out of it. Okay, A.J. DeBonsa, Yegor Demon, they know Ryan Smith as the BYU booster. He sits courtside at BYU games. He jumps on the backs of coaches after they win. It's a little weird, but that's kind of his deal. So they know him. They like Utah. Okay, they're drafted by the Jazz, and they actually stay here for longer than a few years. Because until the Jazz can get that third piece of the puzzle dialed in, and some of these decisions were trades, Darren Williams, Gordon Hayward, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Carlos Boozer, I could keep going. The best players that we've had here since John and Carl retired have stayed here for a truncated amount of time, and then they've either been traded because they got sideways with a coach, or they've left on their own accord like Gordon Hayward, or they just decided they wanted to live in a different city and forced their way out and basically ended a generation of Jazz basketball like Donovan Mitchell did. Jazz have been able to draft well. They've been able to develop well. The final piece of the puzzle is how do they retain long-term to maybe finally do something special, because the fact of the matter is we have not had a championship contending team in Salt Lake City since 1997. Okay, that's 28 years. And that's just the reality of it. We've had some good teams, but none of them were kicking the tires on potentially winning a championship. All right, we'll catch a break. Coming up on the other side, big news out of BYU today. Big news out of the landscape of college football. They've locked in Ryder Lyons, who's one of the top 5 quarterback recruits, according to ESPN, of the 2026 class. What does that say about the current state of BYU athletics, and what message does that send to the folks about 2 miles away from where we're broadcasting right now up at the University of Utah? I want to tell you about my friends at Outlaw Distilling. It's a new partner here on the ESPN Sports Network. Outlaw Distillery is a homegrown, grain-to-glass, nitty-gritty whiskey, vodka, rum, and moonshine distillery right here in Salt Lake County. Outlaw Distillery, Utah grown, with so much history here of cowboys, outlaws, mining, and more. Outlaw has everything on the spirit spectrum, from their spiced rum, vanilla bean rum, Outlaw coffee rum, honey bourbon, barrel-proof whiskey, vodka, and moonshine. They have it all, and they're embracing the Outlaw name by being rebellious and making some very unique spirits that aren't being seen or created by any other distillers in Utah. Happy to have them on board. If you want to take a sip of their spirits, you can either find their bottles in local liquor stores or book a tasting. Tell them I sent you. It's an hour and a half as far as their tour goes, and you get to keep your shot glass as a souvenir if you want to try their spirits. Get your tour and your tasting booked at outlawdistillery.com today. The doors opened in 2015. It's only the 4th distillery in the state of Utah. Deeply rooted in Utah history and tradition, even the name Outlaw is inspired by the legendary characters such as Butch Cassidy and the Outlaw Trail, which served as a primary transportation route for many of the notorious Wild West outlaws. The vision for Outlaw Distillery is clear: help show the world that some of the best spirits can come from one of the best or least expected places here in Utah. I will catch a quick break, but we'll get to the massive local news of the day today, what it means for the local landscape, collegiate athletics. Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, Dave Fox later on. Got a lot to do on a Tuesday edition of the program, so keep it right here on ESPN 700. Be on TV tonight with Dave Fox, 10:35 KMYU. Do some NBA draft. I would imagine we'll react to the news that BYU has dialed in the highest recruits on the football side of things they've had since Ben Olsen in 2002. Ryder Lyons is on his way to Provo. But among these staff members over at KUTV is Heidi Hatch. Lovely lady, good friend. And I'm seeing a tweet she's sending out. Porter, I want your take on this. This is catching me off guard. Most dangerous college towns in 2025. Gainesville, Florida, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Tempe, Arizona, New Haven, Connecticut, shout out Yale, Ithaca, New York, Iowa City, Iowa, East Lansing, Michigan, Bloomington, Indiana, Logan, Utah, and Cedar City, Utah. Cedar City's not a real place, by the way. That's an odd spot. But you have is it really that dangerous down there?
I don't think so.
I mean, feel like this list is valid.
These lists are always compiled in interesting ways. I mean, what are you considering dangerous? I'm sure Logan has had, if you look at the stats, they've had a big issue with sexual assault and the reporting thereof. So I'm sure that played into them making that list. In fact, I'm almost positive because the DOJ had to put their foot down in Logan. The Cedar City one's interesting to me. Is it like car crashes? Is that on I-80 down there? But
no.
I don't know.
Let me pull this up real quick. According to Heidi, crime statistics per 10,000 people. Are there even 10,000 people in Cedar City?
Yeah, there are. It's growing quite a bit.
Data source from FBI Uniform Crime reporting UCR. Local reporting where available. Cities, towns that are home to major universities or large student populations. Respect to Cedar City. Is it really a major city with a large institution? All due respect.
I mean, I guess according to certain parameters.
That's SUU, right?
Yes. Southern Utah. Thunderbirds. Shout out our guy Delane Fitzgerald.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yes.
What's the difference between Southern Utah and Utah Tech or whatever the hell they're calling it now?
Like 80 miles.
But they are two different institutions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're going to bring in Riles today. Look, it's like I said, I just got back from St. George, and it is such a weird place. It just is. We talked about this yesterday. Black Desert Resort, technically not in St. George, but everything down there, Porter, to me is either St. George or Mesquite. Everything else is whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on one side of the gorge, you're in St. George. If you're on the other, you're in Mesquite area. I feel you there. There's not much use in parsing it when you're just kind of building a sprawl and extending it throughout the desert.
You can throw cards on one side of the gorge and you cannot on the other.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's accurate. You can do some other things there too.
Yes, you can. Well, let's be clear. You can do whatever you want wherever you're at. It's just some things are legal and some things are not.
This is true.
Okay.
This is true.
So Porter, among the duties that Porter has at this radio station, which are plentiful, he hosts our Utah football pre-F and post. He really is like our main football guy here on the station. Ryder Lyons, Porter, has signed to play his college football at BYU. So he turned down the University of Oregon. He was looking at USC, where his brother plays, and he elected to play for Kalani and A-Rod, friends of the show, of course, and Brigham Young University. According to, and look, I'm not going to pretend that I've been grinding Ryder Lyons tape, okay? I'm just reading about him over the past couple of weeks after the rumors surfaced he might come and play for BYU. He's very highly regarded, very highly thought of. He will not be available immediately. He will serve an LDS mission, then be on campus in 2027. We're going to have some BYU guests throughout the course of the week to talk about this. This feels like the football equivalent of A.J. DeBonsa. Now, A.J. might be more in a class of his own because he is the number one recruit as far as his peers this year. So, first of all, your thoughts on BYU being able to get this done, and then your thoughts on what this does as far as a shot maybe across the bow for the University of Utah.
Yeah, ultimately, Ryder Lyons, I mean, one of the top recruits in the country. And as a quarterback, that's really the target that BYU had this offseason. This was the one they wanted to get signed on the dotted line. And you just look at the numbers. He's really good. Now, for me, you don't look at like one player in recruiting as a success. It's more about the trends. It's more about the numbers year to year. It's more about what you're doing consistently, right? But this is a player that you almost expect to contend for or at least push for that job in Provo the second he steps on campus. You mentioned it. He's an LDS kid. He's going on a mission, so that's going to wait a little while. But it's huge. And like I said, the bigger story here today is not that they got a top 100 committed quarterback. It's the fact that it adds on to what is now a trend, which is always what you look at in recruiting. They now have 3 top 100 recruits this signing class, including 2 from the state of Utah. One of them's a pass catcher. One of them throws the ball, and I think one of them's going to protect your quarterback. So they're stockpiling in important positions, and as you mentioned, they are doing it with what appears to be a really good backing on the NIL side. Now, a little different than the A.J. DeBonsa situation, just because this is a kid who he grew up with some BYU connections. He is of LDS, so there was at least a foot in the door. The DeBonsa stuff for me is even more wild. It just kind of came more out of left field. But yeah, big deal for BYU and for Utah. I don't ever take recruiting as like a direct shot, but when you're going head to head and when you measure yourself up against your direct rival, and especially when you're doing it in the same conference now, the Big 12, you're definitely paying attention to what they're doing and hopefully adding some urgency on your side.
Yeah, I mean, it just to me underscores the bigger picture of this dynamic that's kind of unfolded, and we talked about it to start the show. I've got ESPN's rankings up. I know 247 does some stuff, and some other, some other outlets have their own rankings. Even I believe this is up to date. Even with the news today that Rider Lions has committed to BYU, ESPN has them, according to the 2026 rankings, just on the outside of the top 25. So according to this, Tennessee would be 26, BYU would be 27, Auburn 28, Boston College 29, Florida State 30 for 2026. And, you add this current recruiting cycle, as Porter referenced, tight end from St. George, ironically enough, highly thought of, defensive tackle, an O-lineman that are all in the top 100. When the dust settles, BYU might have a top 20 recruiting class for the 2026 cycle. That certainly would be their highest recruiting class ever, not just under Kalani. From what I read today, if this is accurate, BYU's best recruiting class was 2010, and it was a top 30 class. I think they finished at number 30. So if they can creep up, into the top 20, it would be historic on a number of different levels. But it just kind of underscores this current, I think we have enough data now to call it a trend, where for about a decade, Utah had a clear innate advantage over BYU in one main area. I've always said 2 things. If you listen to the show, first of all, hello, thank you, how are you? Second of all, I've always said 2 things. Two incidents, 2 circumstances, 2 situations catapulted Utah football into this era of dominance over their rival, BYU. It was a generation of Ute football dominance. And there are 2 reasons why. Number one is Kyle said no to his alma mater and yes to Utah. If Coach Witt took the BYU job back after Urban took off, I don't know what this era would have looked like. That's how important Kyle is to Utah football, Utah athletics, the community up here. That's who Coach Witt is. He is Utah's Lavelle. There will be a statue. He doesn't love it, but there will be a statue built as soon as he's done. That's number one. Number 2, Utah gets the Pac-12 invite, and BYU is left out looking in. BYU makes a reactionary move, and yes, it was, no matter what sort of spin you want to put, because you don't love uncomfortable truths down there. BYU makes the reactionary move to go independent, which was a big risk, but it was probably the only course of action, as opposed to staying in the Mountain West Conference, going to find your own way, which is a tough ask, which is why as Tom Homo walks out the door, if you're a BYU fan, you owe that man a debt of gratitude forever, period, end of story. But because of those 2 dynamics, because of Kyle saying yes to Utah and no to BYU, and Utah receiving the Pac-12 invite and BYU in a reactionary move going independent, Utah was able to build up a clear advantage over the course of a generation, 15 years or so. What's happened over the past 3 years, maybe even a little bit longer, about 4 years, is the shoe's now on the other foot, where there's no longer any clear advantage Utah has over BYU. Both are in the Big 12. You can thank Larry Scott, George Kliavkoff, a number of different mitigating factors, all kind of combined to collapse the home for football in the West, the Pac-12, which continues to be wild. That will never be something I can say out loud without having some sort of visceral like body reaction. Like, I still can't believe how it all went down. But it went down. The Pac-12 died. And now both Utah and BYU are Big 12 teams, Big 12 athletic departments. Utah, a full share member from day one. BYU, for whatever reason, still not a full share member. But they're still in the same conference. There's no longer an innate advantage for one or the other based off of the home of where they find themselves for their athletics. It's Big 12, period. So even playing field. I think next year BYU becomes a full share member, maybe the year after. I think it's next year, though. So they'll both be able to have the same share of the spoils from the conference, which is in a good place. It's not the SEC. It's not the Big Ten. We know that. And maybe at some point that will become a different reality because this is a sport, namely in college football, but also a landscape, namely in college athletics, that continues to shift under our feet and will continue to change. And honestly, I've come to an area of like radical acceptance for those of you that love therapy that the only consistent with all this stuff will be change and will be chaos and will be lawsuits and will be appeals and we'll all clutch our pearls over certain things during the off season. And then August comes and then Saturdays in the fall come and it's like, oh yeah, this is why we do the thing because this is so fun and it's so enjoyable in so many different ways. But the other thing clearly that fell into place, as I talked about when it actually went down, that has really shifted this entire area of momentum clearly in the direction of Brigham Young, at least as of now, at least as of today, is NIL, is the ability to write checks for young men and young women that you want to come play sports for your institution. And I do view this whenever there's news that comes down like an A.J. DeBonsa or a Ryder Lyons. I do view this as something that Utah has to look at and say, how do we get some of that? What do we do? And it's much easier said than done. I can pontificate on possibilities on this radio show as much as I want. I'm not an administrator at the University of Utah. I'm not Mark Harlan. I'm not Taylor Randall, both of whom are very capable leaders. And, you know, I'm sure they'll be able to traverse this space. But how do you answer it if you don't have the same resources? And let me be clear. I don't know if they do or if they do not. We're just talking about it. The LDS Church, its members, the community, they understand the power of the purse. And when granted with opportunities, they clearly have been prepared for this moment. And no, your tithing dollars are not going to pay these players. I know we have to be very clear about certain things that just get people so weird. I understand that the church isn't doing this. I understand this isn't tithing money. But what it is checks written by powerful BYU alumni and boosters that care about the program. I continue to reference this, and I also want to be very clear because I'm sure I'll be aggregated, as I am every time I say this. This information came to me about a year ago or so, a little less, that BYU had 11 seven-figure donors while Utah had 3. I don't know what the up-to-date number is, and I don't have any documents to back that up. I don't have any grandma requests or whatever the Chris Kamaranis or Aaron Falks of the world do. This was just told to me by somebody who I will tell you would absolutely know. So if that's the reality, if BYU right now is operating with a different sort of power of the purse, resources, economic ability than Utah has to find a way to even that playing field because the pendulum has shifted. It just has. For a long time, it was in the direction of the University of Utah because of their P5 at the time, now P4 advantage of being a Pac-12 school while BYU was independent. It clearly caused a chasm between the two athletic departments and clearly the two football teams where Utah was the dominant side. Not just head-to-head, but from a macro viewpoint. Rose Bowls, Pac-12 championships, and BYU was in like the Potato Bowl or the Hawaii Bowl or whatever it was, playing for nothing against teams that more often than not weren't very good. And it was hard to measure where they were at. It was hard to measure where BYU was at because the schedule was really, really bad for the most part, UMass and such. And they just weren't tested week in and week out against some of the class teams in college football because they did not have a conference home. So Tom and his staff did his best to get the scheduling dialed in. They get a good deal with ESPN so they can at least have a television platform, and the support of that network and that company was big to help BYU tread water until they found a conference home, which was always the goal of Tom. He was very front-facing about it. He was never like, yeah, this independent thing rules. We want to do this forever. There is only one Notre Dame. And I always laughed at the hubris of certain members of the BYU community who believed that they could exist on that level. Well, you couldn't, you tried, you didn't, you were never going to be able to. And no one else could, by the way. There's one Notre Dame. Okay. So Tom was never long for independence. It wasn't anything he wanted. He, at some point, was very adamant about finding a landing spot, which they did, which was the Big 12. Now, there were several mitigating factors that led to that, okay? But it doesn't matter what the avenue looked like. The whole point is what the destination manifested, and that is a home for BYU in the Big 12. So tested week in and week out now against some of the best teams in the country. No, it's not the Big 10 or the SEC, but it is what it is. It's a good home for now until the next shift comes. So now that the playing field was even when the two schools were invited into the same conference after the Pac-12 falls right in front of our eyes, Utah jumped ship, and they are probably a little bit fortunate to get the landing spot they were able to receive, which is why Mark's comments after the BYU-Utah football game were like fingernails on a chalkboard for so many people. So that evened the playing field. But now what has really given BYU this advantage is the ability to pay these kids. And do not listen to the spin that's coming out. I love it. It makes me so happy. Yes, paying these players is part of the reason that they have decided to play for BYU. I'm sure A.J. DeBonsa would zero-sum game, but we'll see what the results bear out for BYU because the momentum certainly is heading in that direction. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. ESPN 700 welcomes Nate Jackson to Kingsbury Hall, November 7th, 2025. Tickets are on sale now. Text LAUGH to 877-353-0700. That's LAUGH to 877-353-0700 for a chance to win tickets to see Nate Jackson at Kingsbury Hall here in Salt Lake City. We'll catch a break. The voice of the Utes himself, Bill Riley, joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.
That's the correct name. Jericho Road. Yeah, inside of me.
It's a good day to have a little JR, as I call them, on the program because it's a big day for our friends down at BYU. But the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, is our guest. Riles, are you properly pumped up after that track bringing you in?
I didn't know the name of that track. I'm a little troubled by the name of that track based on the boy band themselves. But yes, I'm quite thrilled that Porter was able to find that banger for us.
Fair enough. For old school Bill and Spence fans, somehow Jericho Road became intertwined into our program back in the mid-2000s. Our producer, Jason Shepard, who wore jean shorts, is now with BYU TV, I think was responsible. Bill, we've landed on that, right? That's how that went down.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was there. Were you more of an Abe Mills or a Brett Bryce or a Dave Kimball guy?
Don't know their names. That's a level I'm not prepared to go to, Bill. You just looked that up. There's no way you knew that off the top of your head.
There might be a Wikipedia page I was looking at, yeah.
Well, shout out Jericho Road. All right, Riles. Look, highly touted recruits oftentimes never work out, so I don't know what Ryder Lyons is going to look like for BYU, but it is a big day for BYU football fans in the program, as they have dialed in one of the top 5, according to ESPN, one of the top 5 quarterback recruits of the 2026 class. I don't know if this is the football equivalent of A.J. DeBonsa. That's kind of the spin that I've heard from a lot of people that cover BYU. But it really does bring in a larger topic that I was excited to have you on the rundown today because you'd be good with this. As you know, the Pac-12 advantage that Utah had over BYU when they were independent really allowed Coach Witt to build a program that was dominant over its rival for a generation. Playing field is even now, isn't it? Feels a little bit different. Do you think this is a sign of the times, or what's your reaction to the news coming out of Provo today?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a good get. I mean, you land a kid that's as highly rated as that. That's a good get. You hit on it, though. I mean, in the football world, there's as many hits as there are misses, probably more misses with highly touted quarterbacks. Probably more in football than there are in basketball, because at least in basketball, Spence, you have the AAU circuit where you're playing against like competition. If you were asking me who's more likely to be the hit, A.J. DeBansa or the kid that they got the commitment from today, I would probably lean DeBansa just simply because basketball projections, I think, are easier than football projections. Plus, I think this young man is going to be going out on a mission for a couple of years and coming back to play. So we'll see what happens. But back to the question, yeah, I think getting out of the realm of independence and getting in a Power 4 league has certainly been I don't know if it completely levels the playing field, but it feels like the playing field is a whole lot more level than it was 3 or 4 years ago for sure.
Yeah, and look, it's a 2026 class. As of now, the up-to-date rankings, this is 247, is Utah's at 69 and BYU's at 27. Or, excuse me, BYU's at 31. With the news today, that bumps them up to 31. And these are all just, I've always rolled my eyes at the arbitrary nature of the ranking system because we know that Coach Witt and his staff have made a living of developing players that weren't necessarily highly regarded coming out of high school into oftentimes NFL players. But I wonder how you would articulate or simply add some color and context to the conversation about whether Utah is in the place that they need to be in with the collectives and the NILs and the supports in the community that it appears BYU is very much in, Bill.
I think from a football side, absolutely, Spence. I mean, I think we saw on the basketball side that BYU's got very deep pockets, not just for this state, but frankly for the landscape of college basketball. But on the football side, I think Utah is in as good a position as they've been in, and probably as good a position. Again, I'm not privy to the numbers, but I talk to people around the program, and I've not gotten any sense that they don't have all the resources they need to compete. And to be fair, I mean, it's, there's different levels to this. There's the elite programs that have deep pockets and resources and things, but I think both Utah and BYU are in good position. And again, I'm not able to comment specifically on recruits, but in this recruiting cycle over the last couple of days, I think both programs have done very well going after guys that last week was a big weekend of visitors for the University of Utah. And based on some of the reports that have come out from some of the recruiting services and people that cover it over the last couple of days, it looks like Utah's had a good time too. So I've not gotten any sense that Utah doesn't have the resources they need to be competitive, especially within the Big 12 Conference. I think when you dip into the SEC and the Big 10, I think you see programs with maybe a bigger financial bankroll, but in the world that both Utah and BYU play in, I think Utah is every bit as competitive as anybody in the Big 12 Conference right now.
Do you ever get the sense that there is a direct, because the term I've been using today is every time a big piece of news has come out as a result of BYU landing AJ or BYU landing Ryder, it does feel like maybe a shot across the bow of Utah, because again, back to the original point where we started the conversation, for a decade plus, Utah simply had advantages, built-in advantages because of their Pac-12 inclusion, and also because Coach Witt said no to BYU and yes to Utah. I mean, those two seminal moments, I think, really were the origin of what was the birth of probably the most successful generation of Utah football, and the most successful linear dynamic when it comes to Utah simply being better than BYU more often than not at football. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this to me is a little bit like when you hire a coach and you win the press conference. Yay, great, we've won the press conference. Well, what happens after that? Here's what I will say about Utah. And they're landing 3- and 4-star guys. They're in the mix for a couple of 5-star guys too. But what I would say is Utah's got a track record over the entirety of the Kyle Whittingham era of developing players and putting them in the NFL. If you want to stack numbers, Utah's numbers over the last 20 years of guys that have been drafted and are playing or have played in the NFL dwarf those of BYU. Now, BYU this past year has won the press conference with a basketball recruit and today a football recruit. But let's see what happens moving forward with those guys, especially since we're in the football realm on the football side of things. Because to me, it's great to win the day and get that announcement and the kid goes on a national TV show and puts a cap on. But what happens once he gets into the program? Now, maybe Kalani's guys down there are developing guys better than they did before, but the overall numbers still say Utah has been the better program, not in the last 5 or 10 years, but over the last 20 years of finding kids, developing kids, and then putting them in the NFL. And if you want to look at early projections this year, Utah's projected to have 2 first-round offensive linemen. They weren't huge. Now, Spencer Fano was pretty highly touted coming out of high school, but Caleb Lomu was just a good middle-of-the-road 3-star recruit. Teo Johnson, another kid out of Idaho that was another one of those kids, but he's being projected as a nice draft pick as well. Maybe not first round, but probably second day. So and I'm not downplaying this at all. This is if you're a BYU fan, be thrilled because you landed a really good recruit today. But if you're a Utah fan, your track record with Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham and Lewis Powell and Jim Harding and all these, Sharif Shaw, you found guys that are 3-star and 4-star, and you've developed them, made them better, and put them in the NFL. To me, that's more important than winning the press conference or winning the day with the recruiting side of it.
Agree with that. And to underscore your point, Ryder Lyons is the highest-rated quarterback that BYU has signed since Ben Olsen in 2002, which just didn't work. He transferred. He never panned out at BYU. So your point is well taken, and I certainly agree with that. The question I was going to ask, though, is do you get a feel up there at all, talking to people, that days like this or announcements like this do indicate maybe there's a little bit of a change in momentum and they take it as a shot across the bow at all? Does it resonate up there at all?
I don't think so, because I think they're laser focused on the guys they're going after. They weren't, it wasn't like it was down to Utah and BYU on the young man that committed today. He was looking, I think, at Oregon. So I think it's a little bit more personal when it's a head-to-head battle and you lose that battle, whether you're in Provo or up here on the Hill. But I don't get a sense that an announcement like today's is really a shot across the bow, because Utah's looking at different guys in that space.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. It's just always interesting to juxtapose the two scenarios. I guess we can move over to the space because you can't talk about recruits. I have Utah's 2026 recruits up. So you kind of elaborated on what you perceive to be some positive momentum for this class, but we can put 2026 aside and just kind of hone in on where we're at right now in the here and now. And, we visited with you not too long ago, but here's how I'll ask a question. Because whether it's text messages, obviously a lot of Utah fans in my ecosystem, BYU fans in the family as well. What would you say as the voice of the Utes, as somebody who now works full time up there, to Ute fans that do feel like there is a genuine concern, this undercurrent of genuine concern that maybe the momentum is shifting down south?
Well, let's see how it plays out on the field. Utah was beaten a year ago by BYU, and I know they've lost the last two matchups, but last year you were playing a little shorthanded at quarterback. Let's see how the next couple of years play out. If BYU starts in on a run where they win 3-4, seasons in a row, then maybe that's swung. But I haven't seen that. Last year was a close game, a controversial game in some ways, but it was a one-possession game late. And again, Utah was pretty deficient on offense and still in that game. I would say, again, we're in a here and now society and everybody wants it here and now, but here's what I will say. I don't think Utah has fallen. I think, Utah had a run of bad injuries and bad luck a year ago. I think Utah's program's still in a good place. What I think is BYU's ascended a little bit up from where they were pre-Big 12. So I think what you're seeing is a little bit of an ascension of the BYU program, but I don't feel like Utah's program has dipped. I feel like they had a bad run of injuries at quarterback the last two seasons, but even two seasons ago, with Bryson Barnes at quarterback, who was okay. He wasn't great, but they still managed to win 8 games. I think that was a testament to coaching, the defense, a lot of other things. So for the Utah fans that might be concerned, oh, man, I don't feel like the Utah program has dipped in any way, shape, or form. I do feel like the rival has made some improvements and built upon being in a Power 4 conference, though.
Well, and I'm also one, Bill, that believes that's a good thing. And that's not just a self-serving media thing, to use the term that Dr. Hill dropped on all of us once upon a time. That's where I believe that iron sharpens iron. And I believe a little bit of pressure from the school that, whether you like it or not, everybody measures you against. I actually perceive it to be a good thing because I believe healthy competition can breed results. That's where I'm at with it.
No, I think you're right, Spence. I mean, I think when your chief rival is getting better, it puts you a little bit more on alert. And they were always a rival, but now they're a rival in the conference again. So that puts you on a little bit more heightened alert because they're not just a rival who's 40 miles away. They're now a rival who's 40 miles away, who's in the same league and competing for a lot of the same guys on the recruiting trail.
So when you, when you've had the opportunity at this point to continue to prepare, and we're all going to be at Big 12 Media Day here and coming up in a little bit, and at some point, we're sitting here in June trying to pontificate on what the conference will look like in August and September, which oftentimes is an exercise in futility. Do you feel like you have a good handle as of now, whether it's reading the Phil Steele stuff or reading the preseason expectations or conversations you have with your peers around the conference about, just generally speaking, how this is going to play out, whether or not it will be a little bit of a cannibalistic conference where, a bunch of good, maybe no great teams beat up on each other? Do you feel like you have a good handle on what Big 12 football is going to look like next year?
No, I don't have a great handle on it. I don't see anybody on paper that jumps out at me as great, as, say, national championship contender great. But I think this league could have multiple playoff teams this year. And I do think, to your point, I think there could be some cannibalization because I think that there's a lot of teams that are on that. I don't know that there's one elite team or two elite teams in this league. I think the Arizona States, I think the Utahs, I think the BYUs, the Iowa States, the Baylors. Texas Tech may be the most interesting team for me, Spence, because they spent a lot of money. I heard that they spent in the neighborhood of $25 million on football. They've got crazy boosters with oil money in West Texas. And this was a team that was 6-3 a year ago. They return a quarterback. They spent a lot of money in the portal. So I'm going to be really interested to see how good Texas Tech is. I think Kansas State's going to be good. I think Kansas could be a wild card because the Jalen Daniels kid has been in and out of the lineup. But if he stays healthy, he's pretty dynamic. So I want to get a little bit closer. I'm kind of like you. When I get down, you get a better feel of it when you're kind of boots on the ground, talking to people and have a sense, right before camp begins, what these teams look like. But I don't have a great feel for who the definitive best team in the league is. I think there's a pot of about 4 or 5 or 6 teams that all might get there.
So Utah football, 39 additions during the signing period and transfer window. And we talked about this. That ranks Utah football, according to what I read as far as the Big 12 preview, is among the lowest in returning production. Some years that would be bad. I don't know if it's bad this year. When it comes to the down season they suffered a year ago, Coach Witt himself during spring ball talking about kind of the renewed positive energy in the locker room. But here's my question for you. As you're making your way around town, when you throw the cardboard down, you do your head spin, you're break dancing, you're doing the Bill thing, whatever it is you do. What are some of the main questions you get from the community about curiosity concerning the team? What are some of the topics and feedback you get from people around Salt Lake and the surrounding area that care about Utah football?
Well, everybody asks about Devin Dampier and the quarterback. They want to know about him. They want to know how good he is, what's his potential, stuff like that. I spoke to a group last Friday, Old Dominion Trucking, and they were having a big luncheon, and I spoke to them about the football program. And everybody wants to know about Dampier and, what does he do? How dynamic is he? And they want to know who the backup quarterback's going to be because, as we've seen the last 2 years, the backup quarterback has played a lot at the University of Utah. And I think that's going to be an interesting battle this fall between Isaac Wilson and Bird Ficklin. Isaac's got experience in games. Bird Ficklin's probably a body type prototype of what, fits the offense very, very well. But he's an 18-year-old freshman. He's never played a down of real college football. And I think the other question I get a ton of, Spence, is who are going to be the playmakers? Who's going to catch the football? I was just talking to Jason Beck the other day and Micah Simon the other day, who's the wide receivers coach, and they both said that's going to be decided in the first 2 weeks of fall camp. They've got an idea of some of those guys are, but two of the guys that might be those guys got here in the spring portal. Larry Simmons from Southern Miss and Merriweather from California. Those are two guys that they think could be it, but they haven't even practiced with the team yet. So I think that's probably the biggest question people ask, and probably the biggest question I have is, the running game is going to be fine. Their offensive line is stellar. The quarterback's really good. They've got a good kind of stable of running backs led by Wayshawn Parker. So they're going to be able to run the football. But when they have to throw it, who are going to be those guys? And that question just hasn't been answered yet, and I don't think it's going to be answered for a couple of weeks of camp. On the defensive side of the football, everybody wants to know about up front. Who's going to rush the passer? Logan Fano's one of those guys, but then they've got a bunch of redshirt freshmen and sophomores who they're counting pretty heavily on. So I don't worry about that part so much because it always feels like Utah, even in their worst years, defensively are good, and in their best years, they're really good up front. I think they like the talent. It just doesn't have a ton of experience, but they're deep. So it'll be interesting to me who kind of plays opposite of Fano, who's back from the knee injury at 100% now. He was kind of playing his way through it last year. Linebackers are good. Secondary is good, but up front probably. So it's probably playmakers and defensive line are my two kind of questions, but that's what the same thing people are asking me about. Who's going to catch passes? We're going to throw to the tight end. What's going to go on?
All right, the schedule was released for men's basketball, and the Big 12 has elected to trim the schedule in order to make for more non-conference scheduling options. Do you like that, or would you just prefer to see the same conference schedule that we've seen?
For me, if you can get some good games, I liked it last year having those 20 games because it was 2 more Big 12 games, and the Big 12 is one of the best conferences in the country. It's hard to schedule. I think some coaches like it. Some coaches don't like it. For me, if you're going to give me 2 extra conference games, I'm good with it because a lot of programs, and I'm not saying Utah is because they're finishing up their non-conference schedule right now, but when you play at a conference like the Big 12, you're going to have a team that's probably a At minimum, a top 100 net ranked team, sometimes top 50, sometimes top 25. So I've always been in favor of more conference games. So the fact they're going to 18 is fine. I'm going to be real curious. It'll probably be done in the next couple of weeks what the non-conference schedule will look like. But if you gave me the choice between the two, I'd say give me 2 more conference games. What about you?
I'm with you. And ultimately, it's because I don't believe, and I'm not saying this about Utah specifically, more often than not, non-conference schedules in college basketball don't tell you anything about the team because most coaches want to play cakewalks to get them ready for conference. So I say more conference games, the better. That's me.
Yeah, because you're then playing for something. You're playing for your conference standings. But the Big 12's elected to go back to 18, so that's what we'll see this year. I am excited about getting to go to Fog Allen to call a game this year, to get to go to Kansas State to call a game this year. I've never been to Texas Tech in Lubbock, but I've heard they get great crowds in there, and they spend a ton of money on NIL, and they've had good teams the last couple of years, so that'll be fun to go to those places.
Wondering, since you brought that up, initially, and yes, I know I'm a snob, I will own it. You and I discussed the different dynamic of travel for Ute fans, juxtaposing Pac-12 markets to Big 12 markets. Now that you've had a little bit, and look, you're from that area, it's like you're familiar with it in a way that most of us just are not at all. But how do you think that transition has been for the fan base? We were talking to, I can't remember who we were discussing this with JB Long, who's still doing some college football, our buddy from the old Pac-12 network who calls Rams games. There's always this thing that people say, and I say it too, where regardless of House v. NCAA, NIL, transfer portal, lawsuits, appeals, Saturdays in the fall still feel like Saturdays in the fall, but they probably don't to Oregon State. They probably don't to Washington State. And they feel a little bit different for Ute fans that for a decade plus we're used to the Pac-12 brands, the home of West Coast football coming here, and the ability to take a week trip to Los Angeles or wherever to enjoy some of these markets that the Pac-12 had that the Big 12 just doesn't. But now that we have some Big 12 experience, how do you think things like travel and experience in different markets have landed with a community that simply was used to something different for over a decade?
I think it's still adjusting. I think a lot of Utah fans last year made that trip to Stillwater because it was one of the few kind of name trips on the schedule. And Oklahoma State's got a good pedigree and history, and Boone Pickens Stadium's good. But and to be fair, Utah was still playing good football at that point in time, too. I think there's going to be an adjustment period, Spence, because, the stops in the Pac-12 were in big cities, and they were easy to get to from Salt Lake City. They were a single flight to Los Angeles or to Seattle or to the Bay Area or to Phoenix. You could get there really easily. Some of these Big 12 trips are a little bit harder. It's a flight and then a rental car hop someplace. But I think once Utah kind of goes through it a couple of times, a couple of kind of rounds around the block, and fans begin to make some trips like this year. Maybe some people decide I've never been to Morgantown, West Virginia, and that's a great city. It's not a place that's easy to get to, but it's a rabid fan base that would be a pretty interesting trip. Fly to Pittsburgh, you drive down, or maybe you decide you want to go to you want to go down to Kansas. So even if it is the day after Thanksgiving, and see the new stadium and fly into Kansas City and do some of that stuff. I just think it's going to take a couple of years for Utah fans to kind of recalibrate where they were because they got spoiled with easy trips to name places. And to be very fair, we're west of the Rockies, and places like UCLA and USC and Washington and Oregon were places where Utah would venture every couple of years or every decade, but they were familiar places. I don't get a sense that the Midwest schools are nearly as familiar to Utah fans because it's just kind of a different geographic part of the country. So I get the same thing from a lot of people. They're like, man, I miss going here, I miss going there. And I get it because there's also good memories associated with the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum and some fun games. I think it's just kind of recalibrating and learning some of these new opponents, but I think it'll take a couple of years to get there probably.
And I said this earlier, like no matter, I don't know how long it will take for me to be able to say into a microphone the home of West Coast football, crumbled right before our eyes, brick by brick, and not still be like, how the hell did that happen? And I'm not one to sit here and place blame and believe that's the way to do it. And look, we've all got to move on and accept the reality. But have you moved on from all of that, or is there still part of you that looks back and you're like, well, how the hell did that go down?
Well, there's part of me that's disappointed at the way it went down. I mean, just is, because Utah was a very small part of the history of the Pac-10, Pac-8, Pac-12 conference, but it was a part of it. And we got to experience it for 13 years. But it was such a great conference. It represented the Western United States. When I was growing up in the Midwest, you'd look west on a cold, windy November day in Kansas or Nebraska, and you'd see the sun shining in Southern California, glistening off the helmets, and it was just cool. But the history of that league just went poof into the ether because of television, because of Fox, because of the Big Ten basically coming in and poaching. It was money. And at the end of the day, it's sad. And yeah, I've moved on from it, certainly, but it was just such a cool chapter of my career and Utah's, football and basketball and sports history. It's a shame, but imagine that you're an Oregon State fan or a Washington State fan. But I won't even say that, Spence. Imagine you're a Washington or a USC fan. I know plenty of friends that are they're glad their schools are in a good conference, but they're not traveling the games very much. I mean, imagine you're a USC fan and you got to go play in Minneapolis in late October. There's no real grab to that. But when you went to play Stanford or you went to play Washington or you came to Salt Lake City, there was a little bit more to it. So I think everybody feels it. But even the schools that landed in good places kind of feel it too.
All right, Roz, last thing, then I'll set you loose. We will not go game by game at home to get your take on the game promotions. We will not do that, even though it's June. But I will ask you, Cal Poly Ring of Honor night. If it's been announced, I haven't heard. Do you have any? Do you have any information on who will be inducted into the Ring of Honor this year?
I am waiting, as you are, Spence, to hear who will be going into that Ring of Honor as well. I think that announcement should I'm guessing probably coming pretty soon. But yeah, I'm also waiting on it.
Weddle?
Who, if you had your choice, who would you put in that Ring of Honor this year?
Oof, it's tough because Ronnie Mack's got to go in.
He would be my first. Again, this is just Bill Riley. I'm not on a committee. I have no say. But I think Coach Mack is so important to the history of this program as not just an assistant coach, but a head coach, but also setting the culture and making the rivalry a rivalry again. I would love to see Mack go in. I think that would be great.
I think that's the answer. Do you think Urban ever gets in?
That's an interesting question. I mean, obviously 2 unbelievable years, but it was just 2 years. I think if he does, it's a while from now. I think, you've got to put in the McBrides, Whittingham whenever Kyle decides to retire or something like that. But yeah, that's the interesting question because he dominated the Mountain West Conference for 2 years, but it was just 2 years. But he also played an important role in program history. If I'm guessing, I would say probably not, just because it was just 2 years. But interesting.
I would push for it only because those 2 years changed everything. They did.
They did. You're right.
It set the course for where we're at now. Say what you want about them, and there's certain things that are fair to say. That, you know what? I'm going to have to table that because, to your point, that's a short window. But really, the broader point is those 2 years changed everything. He changed the culture, the the bravado over your rival, and awesome football teams. But I think I'll land on Ronnie Mack. I think that's the answer for me.
I always say that Ronnie Mack laid the foundation. Urban Meyer made Utah football cool. And then Kyle Whittingham just established the program as a team that could compete nationally and win conference championships. But Urban made Utah football cool for those 2 years.
And then Bill Riley made it sexy. That's what I always say. All right, Riles, we'll set you loose for the Tuesday hit. Thanks for the insight, man. Be good. We'll chat soon.
All right, thanks, Spence.
Bill stops by today, courtesy of Advanced Window Products, where you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. It's a local Salt Lake company operated by Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, NFL football player, good friend of the show, his buddy Jake Weber. These are great people, and they run a great business. So here's the deal. The weather's getting warm. It's getting hot. And if your house is overly heated, you might need new windows. And if you don't have the proper ventilation, I'm no expert here, Bob Vila style, but you're probably jacking up the AC, and it's probably costing you money. Bottom line is, if you buy 10 windows or more, you can save $2,500 if you call today. Now, if you're going to wait to get the windows replaced, let's say when it's colder in the winter, maybe you're going to sell your house in the fall when school starts. If you call today, you lock in the savings. That's why you call the number today to get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Lifetime warranties transferable to the next owner. And great people with great customer service. They make all the products in-house, so they cut off the middleman. You save a bunch of money anyway. Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100. Or online at advancedwindows.com. Dave Fox joins us live in studio coming up on the other side of a Tuesday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700. Can you just pick a more age-appropriate song one time you roll in a studio, Dave Fox? What are we listening to?
Why don't you like this?
This reminds me of something that would be on like the Disney Channel, like after.
This is More Than You Know from Maxwell. Come on, man.
But I mean, just something
Quality
more
stuff.
Pick some Led Zeppelin or something.
Okay, I'll try that next time.
Dave Fox,
I do like Led Zeppelin.
Dave Fox is live in studio. Dave, happy Tuesday. How are you, sir?
Same to you. I don't like the cave look you've built in here. Does this camera even work?
Yeah,
you got sheets up on
Don't start with me, buddy.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. This was not my idea. As you can see, based off of what I've done back here, this is how I do to at least provide some sort of natural light in the jail, cave/jail they have put us in for 4 hours every afternoon.
It makes you feel like you're doing something wrong in here.
And we are.
You don't want anybody to see.
And we are, let's be clear. But, yeah, we should probably move on. This is a topic of consternation around here. I don't know why we've done it, but we've done it. It's good to see you. How are you?
It's great to be here as well. I can't really see you because it's so dark, but it's good to be here.
All right,
it's good to
Dave.
see Porter.
That's
sorry.
enough.
I can't. Hi, Dave.
By the way, he did not send me a reminder today. I remembered all on my own.
After just
totally blew me
after
off.
bailing on us last week?
Yeah,
or
well,
2 weeks
after
ago, or
he
whatever
bailed on me, and then
Stop.
now I'm just like I'm taking it upon myself to just remember all this.
Just stop throwing him under the bus. What are you? You're
We
causing,
did talk last night, but
why are you causing problems with your weekly hit, dude? What's
It's
going
been
on
a
with
long
you?
day. It
Tell-
hasn't even started.
Let's talk about it. A long day. Tell me. Actually, I want to know what you've like starting from when you woke up. I want to know your day. If you say it's a long day, I want to know what you've done.
Got up.
does it have
Got
to do
on
with a
one-
boat? That's the question I want
No,
to
it
know.
didn't
Is
have
there
to
anything to do with the
today,
boat?
Although I did go to the boat
No,
shop
I want the
today.
breakdown. Go ahead.
Got up, did one of the Pelotons.
Okay.
Which one did I do?
I don't know.
Come on, just take a guess.
The bike.
Nope, did the tread.
Okay. Well, you have two. Keep going.
Took a shower, went and met a friend for lunch at a little restaurant right near the TV station at 11.
Okay.
Then started 2 hours of interviews with Kent Crawford
Shout out, Kent.
for a position we have. Got through all those.
Okay.
Took a quick break, ran down to pick up some parts, came back, sat down, and then realized it's 4 o'clock, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be on Spence in 30 minutes. So I got up and I walked down the street because we're right down the street from you, and here I am.
That's your long day?
Well, that 3-hour interview process was pretty long.
Dave, some people actually work for a living. You got up, you showered.
That's what that is?
You got up, you got on the Peloton, you showered, you met a friend for lunch, did a few interviews, and walked over here, and that's your long day?
Yeah.
That is
And now
wild.
it's just getting started. I got a whole evening. I got to do talking jazz.
You know, I always thought that you were a man of the people. It's just not very relatable. I mean, if you're going to say that's your long day, you're insulting the hardworking people of our community.
Well, anyway, you're going to make my evening even better because you'll carry talking jazz.
10:35.
I'm excited about this.
You know what? Let's get a tease. What are we doing tonight?
It's going to be the draft's coming up, of course, NHL and NBA. We have a special pre-draft edition of Talking Jazz. You and I talked last night. Got a lot of things to talk about in there, and I'm excited to do that. May have you touch a little bit on the NHL thing, but we'll focus more on the Jazz tonight.
Okay, fair enough. Unexpected busy day on a number of different levels. There have been 3 trades in the NBA today. We have the draft coming up. Of course, a lot of conversation about what the Jazz may or may not do. But news broke today that BYU has signed one of the top, according to ESPN. There are different rankings. People get up in their fields. Oh, I like 247. I like, okay, whatever service you use, that's fine. According to ESPN, Ryder Lyons is one of the top 5 quarterbacks of the 2026 class. He is the highest rated recruit at that position BYU has signed since 2002. And we're going to learn a lesson here, kids, because that quarterback was Ben Olsen, who didn't pan out. He went on a mission, ended up transferring to UCLA, but he was a 5-star kid back in the day. We were talking off air, and to your point, we are not going to see him until 2027. And in between now and then, he will serve a mission. The mission conversation is always interesting. People say, oh, well, they come back men and they're ready. Well, it's not really how it works, but he will come back as a more mature 20, 21-year-old ready to play with 4 years if he plays 4 years. So it does feel like this is the first football recruit that has been signed in the NIL era that feels a little A.J. DeBonsa-ish. I've not seen an NIL figure. I'm sure that will be reported at some point. Jeff Goodman reported the A.J. DeBonsa figure of $7 million to play 5 months of basketball for BYU. When you look at the Baylor transfer and you do the math with Richie Saunders coming back and a bunch of other high-level players for BYU basketball, the reports are they're paying about $13 to $15 million for this roster this year. I don't know what the football number is. There's obviously far more players. So in a vacuum, this is like, oh, wow, BYU was able to lock in their highest recruit they've had forever. According to ESPN, with this addition, they're now about a top 30 class.
Yeah, jumped up like 15 spots.
With an opportunity to move up. The highest rated class they've ever had was 2010 that was 30. So this is an opportunity for them to have the highest rated class they've ever had. Not just Kalani, BYU football, period. End of story. What do you make of today's news? What they have going down in Provo?
A couple things, first of all. And now the report's coming out that the BYU did not offer him as much money as Oregon, and they still got him, which is...
Who reported that?
It's been on a
Jay Drew or something?
Well,
someone who's
sources say.
Someone who's carrying the water for BYU.
Sources say. But then the second thing is you got to remember this. And I think the Bonsa thing is even wilder, in my opinion, because there is a connection to BYU with Lions. His father played there. His sisters went there.
LDS kid.
He's an LDS kid. He's going to go on a mission. By the way, I have somewhere today I'd read something about he may not do a full mission,
I saw that too.
like a 1-year mission
In
or
fact,
something. Is that a thing?
No, thank you for bringing that up, because you, as a member of the community, can maybe help me understand.
Yeah.
Because, look, if the 14-month thing was an option, I may have looked at it.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know that was the deal. For me, I was like, 2 years at 19 years old? No, thanks. I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Is this the deal now?
I have never heard this.
Okay.
But I do know this much. If you serve an LDS mission, I mean, you're not in prison. You can come home.
Did you serve?
I didn't.
Dave,
I was.
You know what? I've changed my entire view on you.
I walked into the front page disco back in 1978, and that was it.
Okay.
It was over.
Fair enough.
I saw the lit dance floor.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway.
I did not know that was a thing, but you certainly have that prerogative. I don't.
What do you mean? Just coming home and bouncing?
Well,
sure. Yeah.
They can't force you to not come home.
That's true.
But I just want to know that conversation when you go in to meet with your ecclesiastical leader and say, oh, FYI, as I put these in, I'm going to be popping out at about 12, 14 months or something. But I've heard this, and I don't know where that's going to go, but I found that very, very interesting. Man, what a can of worms that would open up, huh?
Porter, can you effort sources at the church office building to help us understand why some kids are serving 14 months and others
I'm not
are serving
saying some
24?
kids are, but this kid's about to, it sounds like, maybe.
I mean, from what I understand, and you guys know this, I mean, technically, this is a voluntary mission.
Well, yeah, that's my point.
You can serve these based on certain dates. It's just, part of the culture, part of the norm to do it for 2 years.
Yeah.
But
or if you're female, 18 months.
Apparently no rules to shortening it for different circumstances, even if you're not an athlete. I just don't know if it gets approved
Well, that's
every
a
time.
good point. I just don't think anyone's thought of it because it's just been 2 years for a century.
It might be kind of brilliant if this kid's a great quarterback. Hey, like Steve Young always talked about how when he considered serving a mission, his ecclesiastical leaders encouraged him to pursue football because he could make a massive difference for the church, being a great NFL player. Here's what we'll do. I'm sure we have several LDS leaders listening to the show.
You want to get one of them to call in right now?
Well, I want them to call in to tell Porter we don't have callers on the show. We're not that kind of show.
Yeah.
But you can call in at 877-353-0700 or text us.
Okay.
What's the deal with this new dynamic where if you can throw a football, you're only encouraged to serve for 14 months?
Yeah. And do you have to let them know in advance? Or can you just, when you hit that, do you give them a 2 weeks notice?
Or do you send him to a mission where the mission president is a huge BYU football fan?
Maybe.
And you're like, just release him after 14 months.
I don't think that's how that works, but I suppose
I don't know how any of this works. This is, by the way, did you know church is only 2 hours now?
It's just, yes, Spence, I figured that out.
Brand new religion.
Yeah. You'd love it now. You should come back.
Well, first of all, let's calm down. Second of all, my son had a friend who was leaving on a mission a couple of years ago.
2-year mission or
No, it's a 2-year mission.
Okay.
But I can remember he's like, yeah, my buddy just left for the MTC. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, hey, I'm going to have dinner. He's doing MTC at his house, and I'm going to have dinner with him. And I was like, wait a second. Uh-huh. When I was young, when your friend went on a mission, you were like, well, he's dead. I'll never see him again. That's over. Like you could write letters, and that's kind of it. There was no email. There was no FaceTime. There's no phone call. It's like an entirely different cultural experience now.
My grandson did that when he went out less than a year ago. And, the first 4 weeks or whatever, he was at home. And, get this.
Generation's soft, man.
He calls my daughter, his mother, calls him every week. Now, when you were younger and when my son went out years ago, you got 2 calls a year.
Yeah, you were
Christmas
in jail.
and Mother's Day.
You were in jail.
Yeah, that's it. Now they talk every single week.
Well,
I always give her a bad time about that.
No, it's good. I think it's good. I think it's positive. Like the mental toll it probably would take.
It probably helps
to
keep him out there.
Be away from everybody.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I truly remember, like, okay, friend went on a mission. I'm never going to
And you
see him
thought
again.
that's it,
Never
yeah.
going to talk to him again. And oftentimes, by the way, that is what happened because you go on and do different things. Anyway, we got completely derailed.
But to sum things up, yes, there's a connection to BYU with him that did not exist with DeBansa.
It's a fair point.
The fact that there are reports out there that he's making less than he would be at Oregon doesn't shock me in the least because of what I just said. I just think that's the way it is. I don't think you can make the same comparison. I think the sports world was turned upside down when DeBansa made that proclamation on television. I think a lot of people were stunned.
He did it on First Take, and Stephen A. Smith thought he was crazy. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What do you?"
I think he thought he was kidding.
He reacted
at first,
as if it wasn't a serious piece of news.
But this is not the case with Lions. I'm not trying to diminish it. This is a huge get for BYU.
Could be.
It is.
Could
but
be.
it doesn't shock me that they got him. It fits. So good for Kalani, good for them. And these things always kind of crack me up because here's the difference between basketball and football, though. Football does take a little more time before you really see what they're made of. Now, I mean, Isaac Wilson came to Utah immediately, and then he gets thrusted right into it, and we see how difficult that was for him. DeBansa is only going to be there 1 year. We're going to know everything about him in no time, and then he's going to be gone.
Yeah,
just like that.
And we kind of already do because he's such a well-known. Your point's a good one because Ryder has BYU connections. AJ has been on the radar of basketball people for 3 years, and he played a little high. I don't know what to call what he did here at the school that apparently
the academy
needs some accreditation before they're actually. Anyway, he played here, but ultimately. When it comes to I don't know where you've read the information that Ryder's not getting as much money from BYU as he did, as he would for Oregon. But
it was in a D-News article. Look it up.
Stunning. You don't say. Did the Provo Daily Herald corroborate the sources? You got to be kidding me. Because here's the deal. Maybe he's getting a few $100,000 less. He's not getting a tremendous amount less than he would from Oregon. It was the same thing.
I agree with you there.
But the narrative about DeBansa was the same thing. Like, BYU didn't step up the way North Carolina. Like, stop it, okay? Jeff Goodman, $7 million for 5 months of basketball. I don't understand why there's this, like, reluctance to just embrace what I'll perceive to be our uncomfortable truths that, yes, you are paying these kids top dollar. Do your victory lap. It's a good thing if you're a BYU fan. Why the pushback?
They're framing it as a whole new style. You need to read the article. I know you're not.
Deseret News? Yeah.
I know.
Let me just get right on that.
They're framing it as a whole new style of recruiting and selling.
Did Dick Harmon read the article?
I didn't even read who read the article.
Okay.
Selling the culture and those kind of things.
Yeah, and you know what, Dave?
And the future, your NFL prospect.
And writing a massive NIL check.
Yeah.
All the things can be true.
Spence, it would not surprise me if he is getting less than Oregon. But you're right. To your point, not substantially less. If one team's offering, let's just throw out an easy number, $10 million, and the other that's offering $1 million, that's a problem. But if it's, a couple $100,000 off of multi-millions, probably doesn't really mean that much.
Let me pull up this article. You know what? I just saw who wrote it. I'm not reading that. That's just he's carrying water. Okay, like that's dumb. But here's what I want to talk.
Make your day.
But here's what I want to talk to you about because, for a decade plus, Utah had an innate advantage over BYU, and it was this. It was actually two-tiered. Okay, I've always said this. The two biggest seminal moments for the Utah football program were this: Kyle saying no to his alma mater and yes to Utah. And then getting the Pac-12 invite where BYU did not. And BYU, in a reactionary move, because it was reactionary, elected to go independent. Throughout the course of those two adjourning paths, Utah, under Coach Witt, was able to build a dominant program and dominated their rival for a generation because of that advantage and because of who Kyle is. Now, they're both in the Big 12. There's no advantage one way or the other, except Utah's a full member and BYU's not. They will be next year. They're both in the same conference. They both have P4 access. But it feels like the momentum has shifted down south as a result of the LDS understanding of the power of the purse, the members of the community and their understanding of how you can utilize that when the opportunity is presented to you. The opportunity has now been presented, and these powerful LDS BYU alums that have built big companies and MLMs and have cashed in to make a lot of money are now writing checks to support the athletic department that they love. And that, to me, Dave, has given BYU an advantage that I don't know Utah has right now.
And especially with basketball. That's clear because you hit that. Now, what were you, around $13 million or something?
13 to 15 based off of estimates for this year's roster, yes. And not to mention what they're paying their coach, who they just signed to a massive contract extension.
I mean, they still have to go out on the court and deliver. But
yes, they do.
That team, I mean, it's
they're stacked, Dave.
They're loaded.
They're going to be
good.
It's
not going to be that difficult to at least put a really competitive team on the floor. Football, I think, is a little bit different. You have to have more players, really, that, to make a team a winner. And, we'll see. The Utes aren't having a terrible recruiting year, by the way. They're signing the safety from Timpview, Nalei. He just committed today as well. I mean, Grant, I agree. He's not Lions. He's not at that level. But, it'd be very soon to see when they start lining up and playing how it all pans out. But, yeah, here's the funny thing. Remember when they first signed DeBanza and they started talking about next year's team and all the NIL money, and then there was a thought of, well, when are they going to help football? Well, that didn't take long, if that's the case. But I'm going to revert back to this. While this Lions thing is huge, they had a big advantage and more power to them to get an LDS kid who's great, who's a top 5 quarterback and has a father who played down there and family members who went to BYU. That right there, you have an advantage. All you really have to do is not screw that up, and they didn't.
It's a really good point. And BYU has always kind of relied upon being able to attract as many as the top shelf LDS talented kids that they can. Now, they're never going to attract all of them because you can have an LDS experience at the University of Utah.
Sure.
You can actually have an LDS experience in a lot of places now in a way that you couldn't back in the day because the footprint of the church has grown. Obviously, there are ward houses all over the place. There's an institute up at the University of Utah. But the BYU experience is unique, juxtaposed to any other LDS experience you could have elsewhere. There will always be kids who just want that. And there's been enough successful BYU athletes who are now having children generation after generation that they will be raised in kind of that ecosystem. And if you just want that, you just want that. But you can't just rely on getting all of them. But a kid like this, I said this about Britton Covey. Britton Covey, if you're BYU, you cannot let Britton Covey out of your backyard. And a kid like this, if you can lock in the best LDS talent, you can throw punches with any of the best schools in the country. You can't only rely on it, and Kalani doesn't. But this does feel significant today, quite frankly.
And I'm not diminishing that at all. It absolutely does. I mean, we got to be patient, wait and see when he gets out on the field. And think about this. You get a call from Danny Ainge. You get a call from Taysom Hill.
Steve Young went to visit him.
That's in the same article, by the way. You did read it. I knew it.
I was on Twitter.
Okay.
I very much did not. I promise you I didn't read it. So I just tried to pull up the Des News website, and my computer gave me the middle finger.
Did it crash?
It just was like, what are you doing? It doesn't work for me.
That would be great if it did that instead of crashed.
I don't have access.
Anyway, there's just a lot of things working in their favor, and I'm happy for Kalani.
For sure.
And it's going to be a lot of fun to see where it goes from here. And don't forget, this could snowball. You talked about them being at 31 now. Their highest class ever was ranked 30. But these kind of things tend to have a snowball effect, and we'll see what happens to it.
Yeah, and look, I want to be very clear. What honestly is offensive to me is when people lie. I'm not even saying you're denying. You're lying to me when you say it's not about the NIL checks that you're writing. You're lying to me when it says not about the power of the purse that BYU has and they're utilizing and capitalizing on this opportunity. But I know it's not only that. I love Kalani. He's a friend of the show. A-Rod, Jay, they have a great coaching staff. They have a great game day experience. They have a great history, and they do have a great culture. And Ryder and AJ will develop as people and young men under Kevin and Kalani. But don't tell me that intertwined into the tapestry is not the checks that you're writing. It just is. I don't know why we have to deny that.
It has to be.
Rely on columns from a BYU reporter from the D News that is carrying water for the school that is owned by the church that owns the damn paper.
The
church owns the paper and the school.
for that, don't you?
No, it's just
I'm sorry I brought that up.
No, it's just easy to draw the lines in what's happening here. Like, do they get phone calls to say, please write this to distract from what's actually happening?
I don't think they have to get a phone call. I think it's just innate.
They own the school and the paper, man. Like, it's the same
Just the
thing.
way it is. Anyway.
I mean,
I really struck a nerve. I think we're going to change tonight's show. We're going to talk more about
don't
the writing practices of the D News.
Just don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. It's insulting.
I get what you're saying. There may be a little bit of difference there, but it's not the focus of this.
Tell me this before I set you loose, and we'll get one more tease. Do you feel like Utah and Utah athletics are in at least a similar cul-de-sac to BYU with their financial resources to take advantage of this opportunity? Because that's what I think the bigger story is, Dave.
That's a tough one. I know when the recent hearings were finally determined a week or two ago, Mark Harlan came out and said this is a great day. This will equalize stuff. It doesn't totally equalize stuff. It helps. I can't even imagine that Utah doesn't have that capability. You talked about all that LDS money that funnels into BYU. There's plenty of it that goes into Utah. You said it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their head coach is an active member of the LDS Church. So is their defensive coordinator.
Sure.
I mean, you know, it's just I'm hard pressed to believe. You talked about people lying that they can't compete on par just with the money, and it becomes about other things.
All right, David, let's get a tease. 10:35, KMOU. What do we got coming up?
Utah Jazz draft is tomorrow. Spence is going to break it down to you. He's going to give you his top 5. Also, who he likes the Jazz to draft. And who knows, it may not even be in his top 5. There's a difference between your top 5 and who you would like to see in that number 5 position. Will there be trades? Why has Bailey dropped? Why has Edgecombe moved up? All those questions are going to be answered by one Spence Checketts. Might even, you're going to have to do a little research on this. Check the D News. Might even just briefly address the NHL draft, which begins 2 days later.
We can do that.
I know you're a hockey guy.
I was on a Zoom call with Bill Armstrong at 12:30. Where were you? Lunching with a friend during your long day?
The first of my multi-interviews.
My gosh. All right, Dave. See you in a few hours.
Hey, see you, buddy.
The great Dave Fox, 10:35 KMYU tonight. We will catch a quick break, and we'll do the 5 o'clock hour of the program. It's been a busy news cycle. Of course, we've talked a lot about Ryder Lyons committing to play for BYU. Oh, we have some breaking news. Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn are finalizing a 3-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Hawks, Terrence Mann and Atlanta's 22nd pick to the Nets, and the minivan's on the move. George Niang and a second-rounder to the Celtics as Boston continues to shed salary. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH. Save a bunch of money on a bunch of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much as always. You know, it's very exciting promotion right now with Dish. And you know why it's exciting? It's exciting for us because we get to hook people up with one of the best deals I've ever seen Dish do. If you call and get set up right now, not only do you get the award-winning Hopper, 16 tuners, auto record your locals, auto hops, commercial breaks, which nobody does. Plus, it'll automatically record your team's games for you. And you can have access to all the streaming apps built into the system. We'll get you a 2-year promotion. Price is guaranteed not to change. I'm going to throw in 3 months of service for free, and also Showtime and Paramount free for 4 months. This is a great opportunity. Call us up, take advantage of this, especially if you've got that oversized cable, DirecTV bill. You know you're overpaying. It's probably $30 to $50 a month less if you switch, but you get 3 months free on top of that, and we'll set you up with dinner at JCW's. It's really easy. Call us up, save money. Also ask about our internet solutions. Guys, I have more internet providers available at my fingertips than any other person you can call. Half a dozen in Salt Lake right now. I have a solution for you guaranteed. If you're unhappy with your existing internet or it's just too expensive. And guys, we're talking there's internet that's out there as low as $20 a month. Call us up, see what we can get for you. We'll save you money, upgrade your system, throw in dinner at JCW's, and have you installed as early as next day. You just got to call 424-DISH. It's 801-424-3474.
All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next. This is The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get a Drive at 5 time on a Tuesday afternoon edition of the program. We got about 8 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Beautiful day, not too hot for June. It's about 86 degrees and clear and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass. We are back in studio after our St. George adventures. Had a good time down at Black Desert Resort. I want to give a shout-out to Kyle Van Noy and his wife, Marissa. They had us down there in support of their charity and had a fun time at their golf tournament. Was able to play the track and then do the show from St. George yesterday, but always good to be back in studio. And randomly busy day today on a number of different levels. A lot of action in the NBA. The most recent as Brad Stevens and the Boston Celtics continue their project of trying to shed some salary and save their new ownership group a little bit of money. Should they have stood pat, they would have had a luxury tax bill of about $500 million. Now, that's just to have the roster. That does not even include payroll. So they made a couple of deals. One just came down. Boston, Atlanta, and Brooklyn are finalizing a 3-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Atlanta Hawks, Terrence Mann, and Atlanta's 22nd pick to the Nets. And then George Niang, former Jazz man, and a second-rounder will go to the Boston Celtics. This is only a salary-shedding move. Now, Porzingis didn't look great down the stretch. Brooklyn now owns 1/6 of all the picks in the draft tomorrow. They have 8, 19, 22, 26, and 27 as they continue their rebuild to try to get that thing back on track. C.J. McCollum woke up to a bummer text today. He's now a Washington Wizard. The Pelicans have made a move to send C.J. McCollum to Washington in exchange for Jordan Poole and some other pieces with this transaction. So C.J. McCollum goes out east. Jordan Poole and a couple of other players will come out west. This was a 4-player move. Sadiq Bey, former Atlanta Hawk, and the number 40 pick, joined Jordan Poole in New Orleans, and then former Jazzman Kelly Olynyk and a future second-round pick, along with C.J. McCollum, will go to Washington. So that happened earlier today. The Jazz have not been involved in any of these transactions. The other deal that went down, it was official yesterday, right after we said goodnight. The Boston Celtics have sent Drew Holiday to the Portland Trail Blazers. Anthony Simmons and 2 second-round picks go to Boston. Simmons is an interesting player because he's really talented, but he is on an expiring deal. So Boston essentially gets a couple of assets and sends Drew Holiday, who certainly has aged, to Portland. Portland gets a veteran point guard to put next to Scoot Henderson. Obviously, Kevin Durant is a Rocket. So we heard from a lot of people that the NBA offseason would be busy, and so far it certainly has been. NBA draft tomorrow night. The Utah Jazz have the number 5 pick, the number 21 pick, and 2 picks in the second round. As of now, we will have great draft night coverage for you after we say goodnight on the show tomorrow at 6. Myself, Gordy Chaser, Richard Smith, live in studio to give you comprehensive reaction and coverage of round 1 of the NBA draft. Then on Thursday night, it'll just be me and Smitty for the second round of the NBA draft. NHL draft comes your way on Friday. Sat in on a Zoom call today with Bill Armstrong, the general manager of the Utah Mammoth. He talked a lot about patience. That was my main takeaway. A lot about patience on the Zoom call. Talked about a number of options at 4, and they're going to continue to look at everything as a young team continues this rebuild. So we'll bring you coverage of that as well. And then the big news locally is that Brigham Young has signed Ryder Lyons. According to ESPN, for the 2026 class, Ryder is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in that class and chose BYU over Oregon. He announced on the Pat McAfee show today. So that, of course, has driven a bunch of content on the program. We will have some guests on throughout the course of the week to talk about this, and obviously what does it mean for the landscape of local recruiting. A shot across the bow at the University of Utah, who continue to be busy in their own right building their 2026 class. But, hey, we have to see how this looks. There have been a tremendous amount of highly touted recruits that never pan out. We'll have to see. Ryder is the highest-ranked quarterback BYU has signed since a kid named Ben Olsen in 2003. And Ben was brought onto campus with a bunch of fanfare and celebration, went on a mission, and was never able to really get it done. He transferred to UCLA, where he really didn't do much and couldn't stay very healthy, so we'll have to see. But a big day for Kalani, friend of the show, A-Rod, friend of the show, and BYU football. But we'll get the Utah perspective on this. We'll talk some Utah football. We'll talk some Utah basketball coming up on the other side. The voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, on a Tuesday show. Then we'll say goodnight at 6 right here on ESPN 700. Randomly busy day on a random Tuesday in June. NBA offseason is just beginning, but the player movement that was rumored appears to be very real. Jordan Poole is a Pelican. CJ McCollum is a Wizard. Kristaps Porzingis is a Hawk. Terrence Mann, Atlanta's 22nd pick to the Nets. George Niang goes to the Celtics, former Jazz man. Obviously, Desmond Bane is a member of the Magic. Kevin Durant is a member of the Houston Rockets. So already 5 pretty significant deals. Drew Holiday also has been shipped out to the Portland Trail Blazers. The Jazz have not gotten involved in any of these transactions yet. But maybe tomorrow will bring something pretty exciting. If you're an NBA fan, tonight's kind of like Christmas Eve. Love the draft. We're going to have great coverage for you guys. Before we say goodnight, start your engines. ESPN 700 is excited to announce the first ever Monster Jam World Finals coming to Utah July 4th and the 5th. Listen to Sean O'Connell for your chance to win tickets, or get yours at Ticketmaster.com now before they're gone. All right, Porter, when Dave Fox was in studio, we summoned the help of the community to help us understand why there's this new dynamic with LDS missions where apparently if you can throw a football, you're only asked to serve for 14 months. Were you enlightened at all by either texters or callers?
No.
You were not?
No. No one had any real input on this. Let me give our texters one more chance. Yeah, no.
I figured somebody...
No helpful feedback.
Any feedback at all? Angry people? Usually the text line is full of angry people.
Yeah, no anger. I think folks are just surveying the situation.
Okay.
Not sure what to think about it, which I understand. It's a new world we're in the landscape of college football and recruiting and the like.
It is a new world for sure. So congratulations to Kalani and A-Rod and the BYU football program for locking in this young man, their highest-rated recruit at the quarterback position since 2002. All right, I will be on TV with Dave Fox tonight, 10:35 KMYU. It's Talking Jazz. We're going to do a lot of draft prep, talk about some of these prospects. All right, Porter, will we be talking about the Jazz making a move tomorrow, or are we going to be talking about the Jazz standing pat at 5 and making their pick where they're at?
I think that the Jazz are going to make the number 5 pick. That being said, if there were a team to trade out of the top 5, I do believe it is the Jazz. I think that if a certain collection of picks go ahead of Utah and say an Ace Bailey is the guy that is available at number 5, I know we've heard kind of on both spectrums the Jazz thoughts on Ace Bailey potentially being really high on him, potentially being kind of low on him based on some certain things. I think that if there's a team, say, top 10 that is really into an Ace Bailey, a Con Knipple, whoever may be available there at 5, I don't think the Jazz would hesitate to move off of that. Take a Igor Demon, take maybe a Con Knipple if he's still available, and, maybe we'll take another second-round pick from you as well just to facilitate moving back a few spots and getting a different guy that we're just as comfortable with. I could see that very well being what the Jazz end up doing, but as you know, Spence, to make a deal happen on trade day, there is a lot of moving parts, and usually more than 2 teams in a lot of NBA draft day deals. So will it happen? Likely not, but I could see the Jazz doing it for sure.
Reminder, when we say goodnight tomorrow, we will move right into our NBA draft coverage. I will be anchoring the coverage, and Richard Smith and Gordy Chiesa, a combined 1,000,000 years experience in pro basketball, will be along for the ride. And then on Thursday night, it'll be Smitty and myself for round 2. And then the NHL draft comes our way on Friday. Fun week on the show, fun week in the community. Porter, before we say goodnight, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the show?
On a Wednesday edition of The Drive, as you mentioned, we're going to cover NBA draft and go from there. Craig Bolerjack, voice of the Utah Jazz, stops by. Neil Smith talking some NHL draft. We're hoping for one Tim Bontemps for the NBA Daily Assist on an NBA draft day. And then we talked a lot about BYU's newest commit, Ryder Lyons, of course, AJ DeBonsa, a lot of team down south elements on the show today. Spencer Linton will join the program tomorrow.
All right, there we go. Join us for a Wednesday show. We'll say goodnight. Reminder, I'll be on TV with Dave Fox tonight, 10:35 KMYU, Talking Jazz. Special thank you today, Zach Harper, Tim McMahon. I just combined 2 of our NBA guests, Tim McMiniman. His name is Tim McMahon.
That'd be a good NBA reporter.
It would. Bill Riley and Dave Fox, for any of the sound you may have missed from the show. Website, ESPN700sports.com. Download our app. Take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store or the Google Play Store for free. Finally, for what we do, our space, every afternoon for 4 hours. Check out our podcast page. Listen to whatever part of the show you want to listen to on your time. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review. Say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars that helps. Reporter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Talk to you on a Draft Day special Wednesday edition of the program. And as always, you can find that right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.